What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another Pokemon Rants. Okay, Timmys, Kimmies, and Poindexters, today is going to be like no other. We're going to transform you from zero to hero by delivering some of the most critical information that will elevate your collectibles journey to unseen heights. With more than 3 decades of expertise spanning from ancient Chinese glassware, historical paintings, coins, cards, and even pets, Shawn at Reserved Investments is truly one of a handful of people in the world with such a wide array of knowledge, consulting, and hands-on experience. Much like the launch of Sega Saturn in 1995 and getting to play that Panzer Dragoon for the first time, we aim to make this a memorable experience that you will not forget. So please turn your cheek ever so slightly to one side and be prepared to be smacked with a stale donut and ask for more. Join me in a very warm welcome with Shawn to Pokemon Rants Podcast, episode number 50. Shawn, welcome aboard.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, it's good to be here, and I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you being here with us today. So, Shawn, we're going to open it up. And again, I always like to do this because one of the things we're going to do here is make sure we try to cover some large array of all the things and all the knowledge you've shared across all the different pieces of your videos and other podcasts, and try to summarize that in such a way that we give the biggest bang for the buck. So as we get started, let's also take a moment to introduce yourself, what you do, and obviously a little bit of your background.
Sure. My full name is Shawn Cermick. I have been in the antiques and collectibles trade since the age of 12. And how I got into the business was I was an interesting kid. I was always curious, asking questions about stuff. And I wondered, I was born in 1976. I look younger than what I am. And back around that time, the sports card boom was a thing with the junk wax era. And how it really started was I was collecting those cards. And I remember I went to school the one day, and just almost overnight, they became worthless. So I set out on a quest to try to figure out why one day these cards were selling for X number of dollars, and now why it seemed to me, because, when you're a kid, time kind of, you have a different meaning. So literally almost overnight, they became worthless. And this is what put me on the path to learning my knowledge in antiques, collectibles, and also collectible finance. And I started asking my parents, I need to find out information here. Can we go to flea markets, yard sales, antique marts, and the like? And I was lucky because I grew up where I live right now, Boyertown, Pennsylvania, which isn't too far from Adamstown, Pennsylvania, which is kind of known as the antique capital of the United States. Right. So I started every weekend interacting with some of these interesting cast of characters that kind of would share with me knowledge, take me under their wings. And when I got a little bit older, I was able to have more in-depth conversations with them. And I learned the in and outs, not only of the antiques and collectibles trade, but also what would become known as collectible finance. What makes items collectible, what makes some items pop and become worth money, what makes other items just go up in value and then all of a sudden drop almost overnight, like your Beanie Babies.
I was about to, I know you're going to say it. Right?
Yep. And that's what I found really fascinating, because I have pretty much a couple of plethora interests that really encapsulate me. One is literature, which really has nothing to do with what we're going to be talking about today for the most part. Another is, of course, finance. And the main is, of course, antiques and collectibles. So when you put finance and antiques and collectibles together, you get collectible finance.
Right. So is that an official term? Or is that something you've kind of deemed as the combination of your skill sets?
It's not something that I've created per se. All of the lessons that were bestowed upon me were created by other individuals in the trade. But I kind of helped coin the term, because other people will call it the investment side of the antiques and collectibles trade. There's other names for it. But ultimately, it's pretty much how money flows through the antiques and collectibles trade. And when people want to diversify in these markets, it's basically how somebody who's educated in finance does it versus somebody who just has an emotional attachment to these items.
Right. All right. I love it. And one of the things I listen to a lot of your content just before we even decided to have the podcast, but also specifically in preparation for today. And there was a lot of questions I had, Shawn. So we're gonna dig deeper. We're gonna unpack a few things. And as I mentioned, I want to know more about you, just like I would be sitting down with you at a table having a dinner. So let's go back maybe to, where did the collecting bug come from? Was it grandma? Was it dad? Was it mom?
Believe it or not, almost no one in my family has the collecting bug.
Wow.
It
Really?
was something that I developed. Yeah, a lot of people think because I have all this knowledge, obviously I came from a family of collectors.
Right.
That is not true. My parents
Huh.
really still to this day don't understand it, because my mom is like a minimalist. My
Okay.
mother will come to my house, literally, and I'm 48, and she'll be like, "I can't believe you have this collection of magazines and coins sitting here. You got to get rid of them. You got to clean up."
Yeah.
And it's like mind-boggling to me. My father, though, he has a little bit of like the older time, you know what I mean? The hoarding tendency where,
Right.
you know,
Right.
if he's going to need something, so he keeps it. And that's
It's
what
the depression, mindset. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. My grandmother's the same way. Yeah. My mom too, really, to some degree. But my grandmother was also a collector, and I would say indirectly. Like, she collected things, but then she also hoarded some things. And grandpa, for example, he was a collector of like antique bells.
cool.
So there's like a bell collection, and he has steins and other things. So it's neat. Yeah. All right. And so the first collectible journey for you was what? It obviously came before 12. What was the Christmas gift? What was the thing you saved for? What was that first purchase?
I was really big into toys at the time, like Star Wars, G.I. Joe,
Yeah.
Masters
Yep.
Universe, all that stuff. Like, I was trying to build
Yeah.
massive collections.
Okay.
That was really the first. Then I remember I switched to sports cards, comic books, and then, of
Yeah.
course, with the advent of the Nintendo Entertainment System, I was completely hooked.
Yeah. 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 We're the same. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Mine was definitely He-Man, Masters of the Universe,
Yep.
Ninja Turtles. I did get into that as my last kind of set of action figures that I collected. And then it moved into sports cards, and then comics, and then the same path. Yep.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Shawn. Carrying that torch forward now. I want to kind of follow the story a little bit,
Sure.
and that's going to be, why did these people in Adamstown or Boyers or the collectors space as a whole, why do they take you under their wing? Why do they start to teach you and give you this knowledge? Like, what was that experience like? Because most kids don't get that. I didn't.
It was very interesting to me. It was more because I was more an annoying kid. I think if I was like an adult or even like a teenager at the time, I probably wouldn't have got as much attention. It was just like, why does this kid want to learn? And you know what I mean? Because most kids aren't even if they're in the collectible side, it's usually focused on one or two collectibles.
Right.
Like, I wanted to learn coins, glassware, antiques, vintage. I mean, I wanted to learn everything. So I think that's why some of them were like, okay, I'll teach you if this is what you want to learn.
Are you sure?
And yeah. And plus, I mean, in all honesty, some of these markets are very niche, even back then. So I think that they felt, well, I have nobody else to pass on this knowledge. So like some of them, like I really developed friendships with. I was in their house. I met their wives, their families. I even had some like sad experiences. Like when they passed, I saw like what happened to their collection, where it went.
Okay.
So it was very interesting. There were some prominent, I don't want to name names,
Sure.
but there were some like prominent collectors in my area that are even still well known to this day, who I had the privilege of learning from. And I don't take that for granted at all, because it didn't hit me until later that, I have all this knowledge and I gained it from like one of the top collectors of like glass bottles or coins.
Right.
So that's something that
it's got to be so cool.
Yeah, I didn't realize it till much later though.
And it's also a very informative experience for you to sit there and see what happens as they get older and pass away, and what has to be done or what happens to their lifetime of collectibles, and whether you were part of helping or not, just to see where we all will be one day, with those decisions we're going to have to make. And that's very informative as you're in the journey. You're thinking, yeah, I want this thing. I want to pay this. I want to, spend that or trade these things in order to buy this. But I'm going to have to get rid of it one day. It's going to have to go somewhere. And we'll talk more about that later. But yeah, it's very telling to have that experience so young. So I think that helped a lot, color the conversation at least.
Very much.
And you were a business administration degree, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And that was out of PA as well? Or where'd you go to school?
I went to Albright.
Okay. All right.
It's a private liberal arts college in Reading, Pennsylvania.
Okay. So with your business degree, you set forth, but you didn't probably jump straight in. I know you did it for a while. You were, especially as eBay came on, I know you were doing that early on. And it was more of a hobby that kind of turned into something you can make money on. And obviously we all had jobs. I know you worked at like electronics boutique and other places like that in your earlier years.
Yes.
But once you had your first career job, what was that?
My first career job was well before finance. I believe it or not, I worked for a company that sorted mail.
Okay.
This probably isn't a good business to get into now because everyone pays bills by, online
Right.
or what have you. But back in the early 2000s, I worked for a company that just sorted mail. And that was one of my first true careers that I got into per se. I was like a lead on the lines.
Okay. All right. And from there, I know you also, and I don't know if this was the reference you made in one of the videos that I had watched, but you said, well, I left the collectible space, and I'm paraphrasing, and I went back into the corporate world thinking I'm never going to come back. What was that corporate world job that you ended up going back into? Was it finance at that time?
Yes, that was early finance. Yes, when I got into that before the great financial crisis.
Okay.
And
so you were in 2008?
Yes.
Okay.
Not a fun time to be in finance. But it was a good learning experience. I will say I learned a lot, and especially the mentality of people, like how they act in boom and bust markets. That was very valuable that I picked up on that because I had a lot of people that would like cash out of like an S&P 500 index fund when the price is at an all-time low, thinking that everything's going to go to zero. And that's why I think that translates on my channel when I talk an awful lot about that, because I see people make major mistakes when it comes to anything that either they're emotionally attached to or anything that is financial in nature.
Yeah, I think we repeat ourselves, don't we? Mankind, that is. And just human nature of how we think and feel. It's that survival instinct that doesn't translate well to money. It's fine when you're running from a lion, but it doesn't work well when you're looking at a crashing market.
Yeah.
Real quick, if you don't mind, Shawn, I'll just say hi to a few people that showed up here in the chat, and we'll keep on going here. But iFOMO, I saw you early on, sir. Thanks for stopping in. It's always good to see you, my friend. Sleeve No Car Left Behind. How you doing, buddy? Good to see you here as well. Drew, OPM #1 mod in the game here. Good to see you, Drew. Thanks for stopping in. We also got an Inept Collector dropping by. Appreciate you guys stopping in and hanging out with us. Appreciate it. All right. So looking quickly at maybe then how this translates, because did you really take your collection from those early years and move it into your adulthood? Or did you kind of reset and say, okay, now I'm going to start officially collecting now as an adult? How did your collection transform from the childhood to where you are today?
I had some items. My rule was, even early on, if it was something that I didn't think I would be able to easily replace, I would keep it. So I had some coins that I acquired in the 1990s that were graded that I definitely kept.
Okay.
A lot, though, of the open box toys, video games, a lot of that stuff was sold when the price was up. So I sold into the hype at that particular point in time and then took the money and put it in traditional investments. So I didn't do that bad, but there was nothing really from my childhood that I held on to per se, because I knew it was something that I would easily be able to get back, unless, again, it was like a rare coin, something that I had where I knew this is something that I really, this is special.
And even back to the previous point we made, most kids or even adolescents would not be able to make that discernment of what's something I can get back. Because once you have it as a kid, you think, well, I don't know. I got to keep it. It's my childhood, whatever, Nintendo, my childhood, whatever figure set. I can't get rid of this. But having your experience and having that knowledge so early on just had to be so helpful as you move through this journey.
It was very helpful. Yes.
Yeah.
I have made some mistakes. I won't lie. I got slapped in the face with a stale donut many times in my 20s where like I got, how do I want to say this? I got egotistical almost with some of the knowledge that I had. And when you get into the point where, especially in your young age, and you start making like thousands of dollars a week in certain cases, you tend to make bad decisions. And I did.
Do you want to share one just for fun?
I remember I came across a collection of toy robots, and I paid a premium for these robots. And I looked at the market and I said, you know what? This market will probably just continue to go up. And I put this collection in storage, paid storage on it for like 5 years, pulled the robots out and realized, oh my gosh, the market fell a little bit. So I sold them at a loss.
Okay.
And back then, this was like $10,000, which was a lot of money to me. That's
a lot.
That particular point in time. So I lost a significant amount of money on that decision. I also trusted the wrong people at certain times in my business career. I formed partnerships early on because I'll be very honest, I didn't know as a 20-something that I would have confidence to be able to do it on my own. So I trusted certain individuals. They took advantage of me, of course, because of my naivety. So I ended up making a whole series of bad decisions. It wasn't really until, honestly, my late 20s that I got it right. And by that time, I sold my video game business.
Oh, okay.
Correlated with that. And that's when I got back into corporate America and said, okay, I'm leaving all this behind. It's done. Not going to serve me. And then when I got back into corporate America, I heard this little voice trying to pull me back into the antiques and collectibles trade. So then I want to say right around after the financial crisis, where I suffered from celiac disease.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it was celiac disease. So there was like a period, like 6 to 8 years.
You're just very sick.
I was sick and I was seeing doctors and specialists, and they really didn't know how to treat it because I had non-typical celiac disease, where it would like appear more as a neurological thing than that of a digestive thing. It wasn't towards the end. Towards the end, I started getting the digestive systems, and that's where doctors were able to cue in on it and go, oh, okay, we think we know what this is.
What was those early symptoms? Curiously, I haven't heard of that before.
Like severe restless legs. I couldn't sit still. I would always have to keep moving. It more affected me from a neurological perspective. And I was actually seeing a neurologist first. And he couldn't even figure out all the symptoms. They honestly thought that I either had MS or Parkinson's.
Wow.
That was the direction they were going as away from celiac. It wasn't until much later when the digestive system started. What happened was I had a backup in my biliary ducts, and my biliary ducts were inflamed. And I hate to be graphic here, but sludge from my gallbladder was getting blocked up. So I was rushed to the emergency room. They saw it on a scan, and they actually thought then I had a rare disease called sclerosing cholangitis, which is where the biliary ducts form strictures. They eventually die, which leads to you needing a liver transplant.
Wow.
Then you get a liver transplant, and eventually the whole process starts again. So you really only live like 10, 20 years later, and then you're gone. So I had a doctor that was brought in, and they had to do an ERCP, which is a very extensive test where they go in the biliary ducts. And on his way to the biliary ducts, because they go through the mouth, he hit the stomach and the small intestine. And he goes, I think I figured this out. Your duodenum is like pretty much non-existent. It's like destroyed. So that's what he said. He did a biopsy and he said it's celiac. So it was just found due to serendipity. It was just one of those things where all these other issues led to it.
Well, say in the best possible way, thank goodness. I mean, if it was any one of those other things, it could have been so much worse.
True.
Yeah. So I'm glad that we figured out what it was, man. But yeah, that led you, I know, because if we transition this slightly, that downtime or during the time that you were finding out you had celiac disease is when you started writing articles and guides on eBay. So that was kind of a transition for you, I believe.
That was my transition, yes. Yeah. And that's what kind of pulled me back, because people started reaching out saying, oh my God, you have so much talent. Where'd you get all this knowledge? And literally, I thought that I left, you know what I mean? It was just one of those things. Yeah, I'm a collector. I love this stuff. but I didn't really do anything with it at that point because I already had sold my business. So I was now
Okay.
focused more on corporate America.
Okay. And we'll speak some to it, but I know that also then led you into now being a columnist for almost more than 10 years, actually, more than a
Yeah,
decade.
2013 I started.
Yeah. Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
Do you still enjoy it? Writing, that is, writing for the columns and the
I do.
antiques? And this? Yeah.
It's become so second nature now. Like I write a column every 2 weeks, and really I even tell my editor, if you ever needed me to do it every week, I can
You have
polish,
enough.
come off with an article within an hour, and then I just proofread it and send it off.
Okay. And that's one of the beauties that I saw in my corporate career. Obviously it's not the same early on, but once you have 20 plus years in,
Yeah.
the ability to just churn out something, what looks like minimal effort, but really it's just the aggregation of all your knowledge and experience, and you can just spin on a dime. And yep, I can drop this presentation, present to this or do that. Yeah, it comes so naturally. Yeah. All right, so let's roll it back though. We got to your career just a little bit more. Let's roll it back to maybe the collecting that you do now.
Sure.
I've seen everything from movie posters. I've seen video games, comics. And this is more, I guess, the things you collect that you actually enjoy, not necessarily any of your short-term speculations for maybe financial. What are some of those things you can share with us that you do collect that you actually enjoy that brings you that euphoria and nostalgia?
Oh, absolutely. The things that I collect for investment are also a lot of the things that I enjoy. For instance,
Okay.
I do like, contrary to popular belief, because I was one of the person that kind of blew the lid off the graded video game bubble. So everybody thinks that I hate graded video games or vintage video games. It's actually not true. I love video games. I love Pokemon. I obviously have a likeness towards this. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking right now. I like comic books. I like toys, of course. And of course, I like coins, more of the stuff on the antique side, currency, stuff like that. I do tend to gravitate towards, right now where I'm at in my life, graded collectibles.
Okay.
Graded collectibles are easier to store, and they're easier to liquidate when you go to sell.
Right.
As I get older, I realize that, like, I own a storage unit that is pretty much full of antiques and collectibles. So I realized that at some point I'm going to have to start selling some of this stuff and just thinning down the herd to the stuff that I'm either emotionally attached to or the stuff like the graded collectibles that I have. Now, normally I keep all that stuff off site. I don't need to live with my collection for it to be prominent in my life.
Okay.
I have made peace with that because in my earlier years I had that problem.
Okay. You want to have it with you and see it, touch it, feel it. Yeah.
Correct. As I got older, I realized it's just something that I know is there and I can interact with it if I need to, but it doesn't have to be the cornerstone of my life.
Okay. Do you keep some pieces at the house though that you like to? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I have in this house alone, there's three floors at this house.
Okay.
I have a video game room, I have a Lego room, and of course I have a fun and collectible card game room. Of course, they're all hidden. They're all, you know what I mean? It's off limits for, you know what I mean? It's not like right there.
Guests don't come over and start funneling all your stuff.
Right. But it is there. I mean, I've shot videos out of some of those rooms already.
Yeah. I've seen them a long time ago. You had some like in the video game room I saw, and I think I remember seeing like you had a Pez display on one of them. Yeah, I remember that.
I try not to keep anything that's really, really valuable in my house for obvious reasons. Especially being a YouTuber.
It brings unnecessary attention, which is a great slide in for your insurance. So we typically look at collectors' insurance is who we typically look at for things like this to try to cover most of what we do. And I'm sure you do the same.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just a little bit of love here. Ernie can't stay and watch, but I've been watching Shawn for years now. Love the knowledge and wisdom, even though at times I don't necessarily agree. So
you're going to hear that a lot tonight.
No worries. But again, good compliment there. I like it. All right. One of the things though I'm curious about, and we kind of touched it, but I want to hear maybe a bit more. How do you enjoy the collection today? You got the day off. You don't have any work to do. You're not shooting a video for YouTube or anything. No plans outside the house. You want to sit down and enjoy your collectibles. What do you do? Do you just play the open version of the game that you have graded as well, and you look at the graded version? What is that enjoyment for you?
Well, I do like vintage video games.
Yeah.
I'm more into the older stuff than the newer stuff.
Okay.
I do have a collection. Like I'm really fond of, like, on the Nintendo Switch, I like the Marvel Capcom fighting collection. I
Okay.
like the Atari, what is it, the
Yeah.
50th, 30th anniversary edition.
Okay.
I like all of those collections. The Sega Classics collection,
Yeah.
because it just allows
Love
me,
it.
if I have only 15 minutes or a half an hour, I can
Right.
pop that in and I can play a game and I can just relive my childhood.
Yeah. Enjoy it. Okay. I like it. I was wondering if, like, you make recent visits, to your box at the bank, or you set up a quick Star Wars scene on the coffee table or something. So just sit there and enjoy it. And okay, I'm gonna take it right down.
No, it's
Wasn't
okay.
sure.
Honestly, all my banks where I have safety deposit boxes at, they require you to make an appointment now, because
Oh, really?
yeah, it's
Okay.
ridiculous.
Okay. Well, that makes it harder. Just swing by and enjoy your collection.
Right.
All right. But, safe. Better safe than sorry. Better safe than sorry. What would you say is maybe one of your favorite pieces in your collection today?
I don't want to sound like an elitist when I say this. Oh God. I have certain proof gold coins.
Okay.
I would sell on the market. They would command a significant premium, but at the same token, I would probably never be able to get them back again.
Right.
So that kind of tears at the heartstrings a little. Like, I know from a financial perspective, I should probably let some of that stuff go, but it's very hard to, because I know I'm only 48. If I'm on this planet just even another 30 years, that's a long time to go without enjoying those pieces.
Well, hopefully you're not even halfway yet, Shawn. Hopefully. Yeah. I'm hoping the same for myself, selfishly. And I get that. And I think that's a great point, because you've spoken to it before, and you've even advised on it in your consulting about letting go. And it's a challenge.
It is.
And I see we even, here we are, we still struggle with it to this very day. What has been your way to cope with that, and at least in some part let go of things when it's the right time? How have you approached it?
When I was in my younger years learning the trade, my mentors would show me examples of people who were really obsessed with this stuff, who were more like hoarders than that of intelligent collectors.
Okay.
And seeing that and how a lot of them ended up in like their 50s, 60s, and 70s, I never wanted to end up like that. That's why I was so diligent towards saving and investing in my younger years, because I've seen examples of where this can lead if it becomes an obsession. I've seen relationships ruined. I've seen people never get into relationships because of this. I mean, the whole 9 yards, even in my consulting business. During the pandemic, with prices soaring on comic books, Rolex watches, great at video games.
Yeah.
I have seen people make disastrous decisions where, like, they spent like $100,000 that they really didn't have when prices were at all-time highs, and their significant other or their wife or their girlfriend found out. And now that relationship was completely doomed to the point where they're still single to this day, repairing that damage. And that really spoke to me, because sometimes I do have an obsessive mind. I'm sure that you picked up on that if you watch my channel, where, like, I can go off on a rant on one topic for a long period of time. So collecting is something that is part of who I am. I just try to pull back and take more of a practical approach and go, okay, if I go down this path, where's it going to lead?
What are your red flags? What are the things that, as you're taking that step, you say, oh, wait, I cannot take the next step, because if I do, I know this is going to lead to X, Y, and Z. What are your internal red flags that you kind of pull back on yourself and say, okay, hey, that's enough. Let's come back.
I actually, because of my work in finance, I will do like a net worth scenario of myself.
Okay.
And if the amount of assets that I have in antiques and collectibles gets too high, that's how I know I'm making a mistake. So I won't let it go past a certain percentage. Now, where this gets tricky, if we ever hit a recession or the economy takes a crap, it's going to look like I have probably a ton of money in antiques. You know what I mean? If certain antiques and collectibles stay here and the overall market falls, that's where I'm probably going to have to go, oh crap, what do I do now? I
Right.
really haven't
Well,
thought that
it's relative. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But that's
Because
why I'm big on talking about percentages, like be very careful. Like I don't like cryptocurrency for this reason. I don't like gold and silver stacking. This kind of
yeah.
ties into that as well.
Yeah, I think at one point, and correct me if I'm wrong, Shawn, you mentioned you were somewhere between 20 and 30% of your net worth was in collectibles at one point. Is that still where you try to keep it at? Is that the kind of the magical number, or do you try to get anywhere lower or higher?
That's the magical number. It sometimes gets hard though too when I can identify opportunities in a market that's fallen, because I then pull back and go, well, do I really want them 35 or 40% of my net? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and when those present themselves, especially with your knowledge, I'm sure it's difficult to say, well, I mean, in a way, and I don't want to sound, maybe negative, but it's easy money. Why would I not take this? And then maybe that's a decision for you to say, well, let me sell something maybe I don't need or don't want in order to offset and take that opportunity cost, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. One of the, let me just move this out of the way. One of the other things I thought about as you went through your consulting practice, and you obviously having to work with many people in the same or worse scenarios than you've probably seen growing up and with the people that took you under their wings. What are some of the ways that you help them analyze even their next purchase? Because even for yourself, if you say, well, I want to move into, I think at one point you wanted to get some historical paintings and artwork. And so from that point of view, what is some of the metrics, maybe even some of the kind of key, I would say, formula that you would use and maybe even advise our listeners on how they could assess, is this a good place for you to move into? Obviously, keeping into consideration what we just talked about in terms of your overall net worth being one of the key things, but then looking at the collectible itself. What are some of the things you look at in order to determine, do you move into that or not?
You have to work backwards. And this is what people get wrong. You have to have an exit strategy first.
I like it.
Have an exit strategy first. You will be able to look at markets from a different perspective. Like, okay, if I had this collection already, how would I go about selling it? What auction houses cater to this market? Is this in this market? Are people really going to want to own this stuff? Like, I've seen people do stupid things. Like, I can't believe people will go into the market and they'll go, you know what? I remember when my dad used to take me fishing. I'm going to put together a collection of antique or vintage fishing lures. Now, that is a thing. Don't get me wrong. There are people that pay thousands of dollars for that stuff. But what auction house do you know that specializes in antique or vintage fishing lures? So the exit strategy has to come first.
Okay.
You also have to look at the overall strength of the market. Like when we talk about Pokemon, right now, modern Pokemon is in a boom market.
Yeah.
If we look at it from that standpoint, going out 5 years, 10 years, is that really going to last that long? You don't think there's going to be a pullback in the market? When I say you, I'm just asking in general.
Of course. Yeah.
I think that is unattainable, the place that we're at right now, with people going to Costco, Walmart, Target, pushing 14-year-old kids out of the way so they can get Pokemon cards and sell them on eBay or whatever. I think that's a little bit ridiculous, where the Pokemon company is going to even look at that and say, okay, we got to do something here.
Right. That's not the kind of environment they want to create. They may want money, but they don't want that. They'll find a balance. It's too bad. I've been working out, trying to, be able to push all the heavy Pokemon cards in my carts and knock people down. But yeah, that's okay. But and I agree. So I think that's a beautiful way. And even we have a compliment here from Sleeve No Card Left Behind. It's really smart to look at it first from the exit strategy standpoint. The strength of the market was the next thing I think I heard. What else do you add to this mathematical formula? Anything
You have
else?
to look at organic collectability versus speculator hype. This is what people, back when Beanie Babies were a thing, this is what people couldn't do. And they got all sucked into the hype, thinking that these little critters, these stuffed critters, were going to finance their retirements and their kids' college education. And anybody like me or anybody else was looking at them going, what do you see here? Just make your money and move on.
Right. Flip it and be done with this. What are you doing? Yeah. And I think that's a great segue, but also to maybe stay on that one point. How do you and these, I'm going to ask a lot of definitions,
Okay.
both for myself to make sure that I'm aligned with you and how we move through the conversation, but also for the audience who maybe never heard some of the terms before. How do you understand if you're looking at this and it's a speculative, or it's more of a new standard for that respective collectible item? How can you judge that based on your determination of where you are at the moment, especially for something you've never bought before or collectible you're not currently in?
Sure. You do price history, number one. If you look
Okay.
at the prices, if something is in a speculative craze, usually prices will rise exponentially. This is why during the graded video game bubble, I used to tell people, you're investing into a speculative market that is not going to last, because if you look, video games were collected even before that period. It was just a newfangled grading company came on the scene, and now people were bidding up the price as a result of that.
How do you, if a market is inherently volatile, and you have just large price swings on a daily basis, I don't have an example in mind, but I'm sure you can pull up a couple. How do you determine if that's just the market and its normal swing, or it's speculative? What's the difference? Is it time in the market? Is it how long the collectible's been around?
Correct.
Okay.
It's how long the collectible's been around, and also the demographics of the people that collect it. So like when I bring up rare coins, one of the things that I hear from younger collectors is, well, younger people don't go after rare coins, and I have to correct them. No, what you're really saying is you and your friends, the people that you know,
the people that you talk to, right?
Because if I look at the market, there are younger people that are coming into that market. And especially if you have money, like if you're a wealthy younger person who collects things, you're going to be more gravitated towards rare coins because it's a more sophisticated market. And the price of entry as a result of that, what we call the barrier to entry, is much higher.
And I think this is a great moment to maybe knock out a few definitions and, again, humor us with your knowledge just so we can all align and be on the same page. But right before I do, Dan, good to see you, my friend. Thanks for stopping by. Appreciate you, buddy. So let's talk about the cycle of pop culture, because I think you've outlined it, and the way I understood it is something as such. And I was going to start out with the question of understanding the transition of markets and how they grow and change. But I think you kind of answered it when you spoke to that pop culture cycle. And so the first one's obviously the items being introduced. The second one's starting to look at, it's being discontinued or forgotten by the primary market, right? And then the third one's looking at that 20 to 30 years later, and that nostalgia kind of gets resurged and re-energized. But then you also have mass speculation, which is at that point the most dangerous space to be, which is stage 3. And then you move into stage 4, which talks about the peaks and starts to cool off. And at that point, you have to, based on the way you phrased it and the way you drew it up on the whiteboard, you have to really understand, is the newer generation into this or not? Because even at that point, you still may not want to be in that cycle if the newer generation's not getting into it, because it's going to die. Did I get that right? What did I miss?
You didn't miss anything. As a matter of fact, that's a very accurate assessment.
So is that cycle only applied to pop culture? Did you write it that way intentionally, or is that more of a general collectible cycle? How would you?
Well, when we talk about collectibles, all is what the definition of a collectible is. It's an item that sells on the secondary market for more than its original retail price. So it's not gauged in time. Like if you define an antique is an item that's 100 years of age or older. So that's defined specifically by time. Collectibles are not. So really it defines to any item that really isn't an antique. That's what they apply to. Antiques move in different cycles. They can die out, but they also move in other different cycles. Like if you look at the rare coin market, the rare coin market does move in certain predictable cycles, but it does so in a different manner than that of collectibles, or most pop culture collectibles.
Could you go into an example, please, for coins, for example?
Sure. Coins are more tied, believe it or not, to the overall strength of the economy, because they're rooted in precious metals at the end of the day. So what'll happen is the economy goes through a period of either turmoil or uncertainty, where gold and silver start trending. people will gravitate towards gold and silver, and a handful of those individuals will then diversify into rare coins, which will affect the rare coin marketplace.
Okay.
So
And I'm sorry, let me restate. Does it move in parallel with the economy, or does it move in opposition?
it can move in both patterns. That you can find
Mm.
both patterns depending on the scenario. During the 2008, 2009 financial crisis, believe it or not, when gold and silver started trending up, we saw higher demand in rare coins. Rare coins was one of the first collectibles that actually stabilized after the financial crisis.
Hmm.
That's why I
Okay.
also diversify in that market for that reason. It's a good buffer against financial assets and also other forms of collectibles.
Okay. Okay. And I would like to even sprinkle in some correlation to the present as we talk about these definitions, because I think it helps color the conversation. And what better way than to give examples, right? So for the people here, how would you define the current cycle of Pokemon? Because it's had its own cycles in a way over the course of the years, and not 100% repeatable, especially in the early years, but definitely the last 10 or 8 have been a bit more repeatable. How would you define the current cycle of Pokemon?
Pokemon's in a massive boom cycle right now.
Yeah. And
even vintage cards, I would argue in certain perspective, are in a boom cycle as well. It's not just modern.
And do you see this repeatability as a transition, which I think is a perfect segue to the next question and next definition? Is this current cycle and the repeatability of it, at least recently in the past 5 years, let's go 5. Do you see that as the evolution and us getting into the stages of speculative, established, mature, and sophisticated? Do you see that being part of this, or is it still, we're still sitting in speculative and we're just in its own cycle?
You're in the speculative cycle still, but I do believe at some point Pokemon will cross over to being an established collecting category. What's going to determine that is the younger individuals now that are just being exposed to the game. 20 to 30 years out, if they go after this stuff and they also want to own the vintage stuff, that's going to help stabilize the market.
Okay.
So I think really we have 10 to 20 years to go to determine that.
And do you think that the current generations that are popping in back into Pokemon, whether they were the ones that were playing in the beginning, maybe they got in E series, X and Y even, and then they're back now with 151 and some of the latest sets. Do you see that as that cycle of the new generation getting in, or do you perceive that as something different?
50-50. I say yes,
Okay.
50% you're correct on that. My other problem, though, is due to the fact that Pokemon is attracting a lot of people that just want to go after the monetary value of the cards as well.
Yeah.
So I think
during
that's
the boom.
pulling people into.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. It's organic, but it's not fully organic because you have the people that are just chasing profits.
And it's such muddy waters when you look at things like this. And I tell my wife a phrase all the time. It's nothing is everything and everything's nothing, right? So I mean, you can't say, well, this is the reason why. Well, there's too many variables for whatever the topic is that we're discussing. It could be anything. And to look at the current state of the market of Pokemon as an example, to your very point, I think it's so dirty with so many things happening, and I think time obviously will tell. But as the dust settles, it's not in the boom. People aren't here for the money, just like we saw back at the end of the pandemic, for example. It died off for a little while. You saw more of the, I would say, long stayers in the market, long people that are going to be there for a while, and the people that came for the quick money grab left. They're back again. And some more, I might add, probably a few extras. But I think it'll stabilize again over time, and we'll see, where do we land? Where's that new bottom? What's the new floor of where we are?
Right now, in my opinion, Pokemon market is not healthy.
Yeah. So are you staying out of it?
Well, believe it or not, I do like speculating on some of this stuff. I'm not going to lie.
Okay.
I mean, I buy some of this stuff, but I won't pay a significant premium. I think the premium's being paid for like Surging Sparks, Prismatic Evolutions. I think it's ridiculous, you know? And I get that the pull rate is so hard to get some of the good cards, if you really want to open it. But it just puts a bad taste in my mouth. It almost reminds me of like mass produced scarcity, where the company just held back production and they know that people are going to hoard this stuff to no end. So who does it really benefit? It's not getting in the hands of the players or the collectors. So how do you develop a nostalgic attachment to it?
Yeah, and even to your point, on the side of nostalgic attachment, there's still this goes to the muddiness. There's still people like myself with my kids, and we're playing the TCG, and we're opening packs, and we're going to tournaments, and like we're watching the new anime series, and so like there'll be that for them. But then there's also so many that are just sitting there with sealed stop tape in their closet, and never done anything, never even opened a pack.
No.
So it's a mix of things. Let's go back to the definition. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Can you help us define the speculative, established, mature, and sophisticated in terms of collectibles, and help us understand where are the breakpoints in that?
Absolutely. Do you want me to just pick a collecting category and analyze it for you?
Yeah. Just kind of break it down with one example. If it makes sense, it'd be great, please.
Absolutely. If we look at like comic books, a lot of people think that comic books are a mature and sophisticated category. That is actually incorrect. Comic books came into their own with the advent of the Overstreet Price Guide, which was first published in 1970.
76 or 70, okay.
It's 19, yeah. And the reason why it was published was because at that particular point, several years before, people started buying up comic books. They were speculating on them, and people wanted to know what their books were worth. So in 1970, really at that point then, we can look at comic books becoming a thing where that guide was produced. Collectors were in the market. You had dealers then that were forming to serve those collectors. And as a result, that market got off the ground. The problem is it takes many, many decades for a market to stabilize and transition from speculative to established. So even today, if we look at the comic book collecting marketplace, I would argue from this standpoint, if we look at like golden age comic books, they're established. Some of the silver age comic books are, but pretty much bronze, copper, modern era comic books are still speculative. So this becomes more nuanced than most people realize, because you have to look at the market not only as a whole, but you have to break it out in subtypes like golden age, silver age, bronze age. You get where I'm going.
Well, and it also depends on when the product was released and the state of the market at the time that it was released. And I hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
I hear you saying that, well, there's a big difference between when the object became collectible versus that prior period when nobody really collected it. And us trying to now, as collectors, find those items in that period of it being a non-collectible, if you will. That's really the golden age, right? Or the platinum, perhaps.
Correct. And one of the golden rules used to be, if you were going to collect something, for something to be worth money, it had to be something that was once popular and loved, but then almost became worthless. And then people missed the item because they didn't hold them in mint condition, or they didn't really care about the item. So then they went back to the market and tried to buy up those items, and now they became collectible. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
So in other words, what's happening now is we've completely removed the mystery of things become worthless, and we're hoarding everything, thinking that it's a treasured collectible that's going to always go up in value. That's my problem with the modern era collectible space. Like I talked about this in depth on my channel, like what happened with Nintendo 3DS. Nintendo discontinued the 3DS, and everybody just started hoarding this stuff. And all of a sudden it shot up in value where it never hit the clearance bins. It never dropped in value. People didn't have a chance to go and experience it when it wasn't really coveted. That's a problem.
And I think you spoke to this before in how we've removed that cycle of being worthless. And we've fast forwarded so much that it's all a concern for you, which I think then really poses an interesting question. Is there anything really collectible today?
There's going to be some stuff that always slips by.
Yeah.
That just
Okay.
nobody notices the first time around, that becomes valuable. But for the most part, a lot of the mass-produced stuff, I don't think that people realize. When we looked at the term collectible back in like the 1950s or 60s, the amount of stuff in existence didn't compare to what is being produced today. Because now you have companies like, whether it be Nintendo or Lego or even Nike producing sneakers, or Funko Pops, or even collectible card games. A lot of these manufacturers know in the back of their mind, we can sometimes produce more of this stuff, or we can create limited edition products, because people are going to just hoard this stuff and they're going to call it investment.
Right.
And it doesn't matter to them if it goes up in value, because they don't make any money from the secondary market.
Yeah. For now.
Correct.
For now. We got one here from Pokemon Class. It's good to see you, my friend. Thanks for stopping by. So an established collectible requires a period of authentic and organic growth rather than widespread speculation. I think that's a question mark, right?
Yes. In most cases, yes. That's 100% true.
But I think you've now spoken a little bit from speculative to reaching established, and maybe just clarify as we now move from there to mature.
Rare coins would be considered a mature market.
Okay.
High-end pieces of art from the modern masters would be considered a mature market.
Was it this that I heard you say, like 100 years or something like that? What was the phrase you used before in terms of time as well that moves it into a certain space?
Usually, yes, it takes decades or 100 years. If you want to call them antiques, most antiques that are still coveted today, they're part of a mature, sophisticated market.
Okay.
Now, it doesn't guarantee investability. Like if you look at stamps,
right?
Stamp collecting has dropped off a cliff, at least in the United States.
Right. Okay. It may come back. I'm holding on to some stamps, so fingers crossed. They were passed down to me, so I don't have an investment in there, but still.
I will tell you this: you have a better chance of an antique collecting category coming back than that of a dying collectible. So, for instance, stamps have a better chance of coming back than, say, Beanie Babies.
Right.
That makes sense.
And I would I would second that one just off of my knowledge of Beanie Babies. But now, what takes you to the next level? How do you get to sophisticated? What crosses that path?
Absolutely. It's a market that has been proven to be collected for almost over 100 years, if not more. Like if you look
without falling.
Yes. If you look at rare coins, there's predictable cycles there. There's patterns. Like if we look at high-end art, people probably don't realize this. High-end art is predicated on two things: the state of the overall economy and also the amount of players in the market. The people that are going after high-end art are people that have a net worth over, on average, $100 million or more, preferably $1 billion or more.
Okay.
There's only a handful of players in that market at any given time. So if you invest in that market, again, going back to what I said earlier, you have to think of an exit strategy. Because if you're going to sell that piece and the market takes a tank, you're going to have even less people that are going after those items. That's why right now the contemporary art market is actually in a bit of period of a pullback.
Okay. And I think you've even spoken to this before in relation to one of your red flags for a given collectible is when you see a lot of people come into that market, as far as the high rollers that are not there before, and they're willing to drop all the money. So that's like a red flag for you to say, well, okay, I'm backing off here.
Yep.
Okay. We had another one here from Matt. I see Dan, you gifted 10 memberships. Thank you, sir. I much appreciate it. You don't have to do it, but greatly appreciated, sir. Thank you so much. We had another one here from Matt. So do mature markets ever experience wild price, demand, volatility, or is it just a byproduct of speculation collecting categories?
No, they experience very, very large price volatility at times. If you look at even the rare coin market, if you look at the high-end art market, there's predictable cycles, and there's also unexpected booms and busts within those markets. So yes, when you look at any of these items, they're all speculative per se, because these are items without underlying cash flows.
Okay.
if that makes sense. So you got to look at antiques and collectibles. This is why on my channel, I always go nuts when somebody comes to me and says, I'm putting all my money in Pokemon cards, graded video games, and Bitcoin, and I don't care what you say. All those markets, if you go to sell that item, you're basically selling it into the theory of the greater fool theory, where someone's going to come into the market and pay a higher price than what you did to own that item. It's very risky if you put all your money in markets like that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, especially when you're growing your wealth, I'm not going to get the phrase correct here, but it's something along the lines of you are bullish in some areas of investment early when you're young, that is, in order to build your wealth. But once the wealth is established, then obviously you need to diversify to protect your investment. So
Correct.
Something along those lines. Thanks for the questions, Matt. Appreciate it, buddy. Dan did mention, he says, I can't catch it live, but excited for this one as always. Have a great night. Have a great chat. Thanks, buddy. And that says he's bullish on Beanie Babies. He's joking. He's trolling. He's going to change his name to Inept Stamp Collector. I got some stamps I'll sell you, buddy. I got some good ones. All right. So now let's do a few more definitions and we'll carry on the conversation. So thanks for the time to kind of back up and set us all on the same stage. Talk to us a bit about the rarity in terms of condition, manufactured, and absolute. Can you speak to that a little bit, please?
Absolute. Yes. I almost said absolutely because you brought up absolute. But yes, absolute rarity is probably the best kind of rarity you can have in the collectible space. I'll give you an example. When Action Comics 1 was first produced back in 1938, nobody was collecting comic books back then. So it just premiered on the newsstand. People bought it. They took it home. They read it. They put it in their pocket. They threw it away. They didn't care about it. It was just another comic book, a form of entertainment that nobody ever thought would become valuable. Well, today, when we look at the population reports that are put out by CGC, we now realize there's less than 100 copies of Action Comics 1 that were ever graded by CGC. So that book meets the definition of being, at the very least, scarce, if not rare, in comic book terms.
Right.
And because it's a key issue that introduced Superman, we all know how popular Superman is and has become. It's now worth millions of dollars on the secondary market. So that's an example of absolute rarity. If you are investing in any type of antique or collectible over the long term, you want absolute rarity, especially if you can predict the popularity of the market. For instance,
it really goes well back into the previous comment we made, I think, as well, on the fact that it's that stage of before the thing was collectible as well.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Then you have something known as condition rarity. An example of this, and a lot of Pokemon cards fit this definition as well, unfortunately.
Right.
If we look, and I'm going to use comic book terms just for this, but you'll be able to follow along even if you don't know the comic book market. So don't worry if you're watching this and you have no idea anything about comic books. Giant Size X-Men 1 is a very popular key issue that premiered in 1975. It's considered a key issue comic book. And even in just 9.4 condition, it sells for thousands of dollars. When you look at the census population, though, of how many copies were graded, there's a ton out there. If we extend that in comic book collecting terms, 9.8 is a very coveted grade because there's very few 10 gem mint comic books in existence. Let's be realistic. 9.9, hard to come by. So most collectors that really want top of the grade, they'll go for a 9.8 condition copy. Well, there's roughly 220 copies of Giant Size X-Men 1 in 9.8 condition. Now, a lot of people will go, well, geez, Shawn, that's not that much. But if you look at that comic book, how many copies are in existence that have ever been graded? There's thousands of them. So what that means is if you're going after that book in 9.8 condition, it is high grade, but again, it's not rare. It's condition rare because you don't have to buy it just in 9.8 condition.
Right.
So let's apply the same scenario to the Action Comics 1. That comic book in any grade is sought after and rare.
Okay.
Giant Size X-Men 1, though, because there's thousands of copies out there readily available in low grade to high grade. Just because you have it 9.8 doesn't mean it's rare. It means it's rare for its condition.
Right. Okay. And you probably say the same thing for base set first edition Shadowless Charizard.
Correct. I didn't want to offend anybody, but what I was going to say, I'll just use the example. Like if you look at certain Pokemon cards, and we all have these in our collection. For instance, I love Skyridge, a reverse hollow foil Charizard from the Skyridge set.
Yep.
I think there is 146 in PSA 10 alone from that set, if I'm not mistaken. 146 may seem not a lot compared to how many cards were minted, how many cards are available. But if you look at how many relative cards are out there, 146 for that to be in PSA 10 condition alone, that's a lot of cards.
Right.
So that would be conditional rarity, not true rarity.
Okay. And I think manufacturer is probably the easiest one here. As far as manufactured rarity, that's what we see here today flying off the shelves. The serialized cards and all those types of things, right?
All is what it is when a manufacturer limits the supply of an item and only makes
intentionally
examples. Yes, Nintendo does this all the time with their special limited edition games and the like.
Okay. This maybe is a good time to pose a question and give some opposition on this. So help us understand then, how is it, for example, the Moonbryon from Evolving Skies, with as many copies as there are, is still going for such a premium? Is it purely the hype? Is it purely demand, overpowering current population? What's your opinion on this?
It's both hype and demand, because right now Pokemon is in such a boom market where people are pulling money into this market as well. And then you also have the hype on top of that. So you have demand and hype that is really creating this weird dichotomy.
Right. Because, I mean, for so long, people talked about population reports. And in all honesty, in the past year and a half, in Pokemon at least, it seems like you just throw those out the window. It doesn't even matter.
Correct. You're right. You're not wrong.
Yeah. Again, that's perhaps short-lived. Time will tell. And I don't think we can sustain the way this is going at the moment, for sure. But yeah, the population reports seem to not have an impact because, and people give the argument, and I think this is a good one for you to kind of maybe speak to. People give the argument of, well, let's just say it for even numbers, 2,000. It's way more than that, but say it's 2,000. Well, there's far more than 2,000 people who want that Moonbryon. Clearly, we have hundreds, millions of people collecting Pokemon cards, many of which are not just the flippers and here for money. It's going to be people that actually collect and enjoy.
Sure.
So 2,000 is not that many. And that's usually the argument that you hear when you hear, well, it's a high population, but that was before. You have to look at the current demand of the hobby in the market now, and then reassess that and say, well, is that still high? What is your take and your perception on those types of arguments?
I think that time will tell in a lot of those scenarios. What I will tell you, I tell people to use caution if they're paying premiums for a lot of the modern era cards, especially when you look at what the vintage counterparts are selling for. That's key too. Like if you look at a collecting market and you look at what certain cards or whatever it is selling for that are being produced right now in the modern era versus their vintage counterparts, you can learn a lot about that market.
Yep.
Problem is people don't want to contrast and compare those particular pieces in their own market.
Yeah.
But that's really
especially when they're not in both, or they're only favor one. Yeah, it starts to be hard.
And that's why
I do want to pause you here because I want you to answer in your own way, that just like you would on your own channel. Don't worry about answering in any way that you maybe hold back in what you would say or want to say. Okay. We want you here because we love who you are and how you are and what you know and your knowledge, and don't hold back to say, oh, I don't want to offend anybody. Obviously you're not vulgar. You don't go off the deep end. We can both go on tangents, but that's okay. It's called Rants Podcast, so we're okay with that. So you be you, okay?
Fair enough.
All right. Classics, no problem, my friend. Happy to do it. And thanks for the good questions. We have one here from Son of a Merc. Good to see you, Son of a Merc. I wonder how much Pocket is pushing. So Pokemon Pocket, I'm sure you're familiar, is pushing the organic versus against the money grab. So what are your thoughts on some of the newer additions here now, I would say supplementing and adding to the hype of this Pokemon market that we're in?
I think it's confusing the market. I will say
Yeah.
that it's adding a different dynamic. And I
Yeah.
think that that is going to create chaos in the market long term too, because it
Hmm.
adds an extra layer. It adds more variance and more risk. I will say that.
Do you think the people that come in, and maybe this is just a extension of his question, do you think the people coming in through Pocket will be some that will be more organic that stay? Or do you think they would maybe just come in, see what Pokemon's about, and turn into a money grab? Or do you think that itself generates more organic people in the hobby?
I think it can contribute to more organic people. The problem is, I think right now, with this being in a boom market, the Pokemon company has to get their supply issues straightened out so that people can
Mm,
actually get the physical product. I
right.
think that's what's going to help. I mean, I was in just a Best Buy, and Best Buy isn't really known for Pokemon products. And I mean, even just the sets that aren't really like popular right now that everyone's going nuts for, your Surging Sparks, your
Hmm.
Prismatic Evolutions, their whole aisle was pretty much ripped apart.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's getting completely insane where people are just buying and hoarding this stuff, and that's what worries me. That's why I don't wanna get too far ahead because I know you'll probably get to this eventually. That's why I tell people, if you're somebody who's not financially established and you're sitting on a ton of Pokemon products, please sell some of it into the hype and get yourself financially established. You can always buy Pokemon cards back later at a later date.
Right. We will get there, but it's good advice to drop several times along the way. So don't hesitate. Especially if you're leveraged in debt or you have other financial challenges, just don't.
No,
Just
on
simple
another
as that. Don't.
I have people come to me and they tell me, Shawn, I'm building generational wealth through Pokemon cards. And I don't mean to be rude, and this is where I'm going to probably
Yeah,
offend some of
please,
your
please
audience.
go ahead.
Please don't try to do that. It is a speculative asset. If you're financially established and you want to diversify capital into Pokemon, that's
Different.
fine.
Right.
If you have like a net worth, even just $100,000, if you want to put 10 grand into Pokemon, I'm fine with that. But please don't try to build generational wealth with any of these speculative assets. Even I would say the same thing because this is where I get criticized. Well, Shawn, what if it was rare coins? I would tell you the same thing. You cannot build generational wealth with speculative asset. You have to put it in real hard financial assets, real estate, then
Right.
diversify in. And if that collection goes up in value and you leave it to your kids, your nephews,
Right.
your nieces, great. You just did build generational wealth, but you have to have the hard stuff figured out first.
Right. This can't be the number one. This needs to be like number 15 or 20.
Right.
So somewhere else way down the line. And I know Dan, Catch 'em All Collectibles. He always speaks about it in that way, and it's he gets tired of giving his disclaimer, but it's build your 401k, have your retirement plan, have your savings, pay off your debt, pay off your house, all that stuff. Be done with that, then come over and enjoy the hobbies that you enjoy, whatever it may be.
Yep. I
Yeah.
agree completely.
Crystal, hey, good to see you. Thanks for stopping in, dear. Always good to see you. I'll see if I got some more questions here as we go to the next point. One other definition I want to kind of help define. It may sound obvious, but maybe it's not, right? And especially navigating markets like we're in today, specifically Pokemon, it's always good to kind of re-ground yourself. Define a bubble for us.
Okay, well, first I got to state this. I think that Pokemon is in a speculative frenzy, not so much
Right.
a bubble.
I've heard you use those, and I think this is a great way for us to differentiate between the two.
Sure. A speculative bubble can start by two ways. Usually it starts, and this is where we're going to get a little bit like with great at video games. Usually, in certain cases, a speculative bubble can start with manipulation, like a market that is going to be manipulated.
Right.
If you have an idea or you have inside knowledge, or I hate to
Mm.
say this, if you're an unscrupulous individual, or maybe you started a grading company, you could potentially come into the market and work behind the scenes and manipulate it. And that's one way that a speculative bubble can get off the ground because enough people believe that it's
Mm.
authentic growth rather than speculative. And then they buy into it. This is what happened with Beanie Babies, believe it or not.
Oh, okay.
Beanie Babies were never meant to be this way. It was the fact that the company themselves that created the market They limited supply, and they only sold to specific retailers at that time. Ty, the company that produced Beanie Babies, would only sell to specialty gift shops. You couldn't go to a toy store like Toys R Us or KB Toys at the time back in the day. Now you can find them other places. But back in the day, they controlled the supply and who they would sell to. That's what helped start a speculative bubble. So usually a speculative bubble is started from nefarious purposes. It's not really organic.
And the reason you call the current Pokemon market a frenzy, in a sense, is because of the mix of things and the muddiness that we spoke about before. So there's a lot of organic, but there's also money hungry, and that's how you differentiate it too.
Yeah, Pokemon's not going to go to zero. Like, you're not going to see the massive crashes that we saw. Even like if you look at what happened with the graded video game market, graded video games in certain instances, and some games fell 80% in value. You're not going to see that in this space. Now, obviously, the modern stuff is more speculative than the vintage Pokemon cards, but I don't see that much volatility in this market. It's not been artificially inflated, in my opinion. Let me word it that way.
Okay. I think that gives us a good summary, and it's also a really great segue. But I'll take one or two questions here from the chat before we continue on. But that gives us a really good foundation for some of the definitions I want to lay out there, because for me, I was wanting some clarity on a few of them. I wanted to also make sure I understood a few of those correctly, but also, again, share that with the audience. Matt says, I've always argued that collecting fundamentals include rarity, scarcity, condition, historical significance, and popularity. Thoughts on these factors, and is he missing any?
No, but rarity and scarcity are pretty much the same thing.
Okay.
It's referring to how many surviving examples, how many examples per grade. So yeah.
I'll let you guess which Pokemon cards he focuses on with the Pokemon Classics in his name there.
Vintage?
the classics never go out of style.
Yes.
I love it. All right. Let's now transition this just a little bit, Shawn, to your perception and kind of going back even to population reports.
Sure.
How much, just an opening question, how much of these do you look at in which collectible category? And are there some that you just ignore the population report because you don't feel like it's relevant? Or is it always relevant for you?
It's pretty much always relevant. I will say it's a little bit misleading for certain modern collectibles, and also collectibles that don't have heavy demand on the secondary market. Like every collecting category that can be third-party graded, there's always going to be something where the item just doesn't sell for that much. So people look at the population reports and they go, well, gee, it's really quote unquote rare because there's only X number of copies graded. Well, the reason why there's only X number of copies graded is if you look at the secondary market price, it's just not worth sending in to be graded.
Right.
Now, obviously, certain collecting categories have this problem more than others. It's relatively fairly cheap, even with PSA price increases, to send in a card to get graded.
Right.
Whereas
15, 16
other items, like if you're sending in a video game or an action figure, there's a substantial cost to get that item graded and returned.
They're like, what, $60, $70, something like that?
Exactly.
Right.
So it has to be worth it.
Right. Yeah, and I found some weird dynamics because I didn't get into the details, but I do run a Pokemon business, and it's what we do. Everything from singles to graded to plushies to sleeves for your cards, just all kinds of different stuff, right?
Awesome.
And in doing this and navigating and learning, I got people say, well, hey, could you grade a couple of these non-hollows from Sun and Moon for me? Because I'm looking to get a set of these in a 10, and nobody's grading these few cards because nobody wanted them if they're just a regular uncommon, right? Some, let's say, Hidden Fates, for example. And so, yeah, okay, well, we'll grade a few. And it's ironic that obviously they're not as liquid, they don't move as quickly.
Correct.
But they go for a premium because there's just not that many on the market. And it's so funny to see. It's like, well, okay, these are like non-hollow uncommons, and they're paying $69.99 for them. Okay. Ask and we shall deliver, but obviously you don't want to stack up with thousands of those either. So that's the key, right? It can't be your mainstay. It has to be that supplement that you have. going back to grading, and actually we had one here from again from Matt. In my opinion, population is important, but it's relative to the size of the market. Pokemon has larger collecting base, even without the hype in the last 5 years, than other collectible markets. Yeah, it's grown tremendously. And maybe we pause there with a question from your point of view. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Shawn. How do you see the size of Pokemon, and how do you compare that just in terms of the people in the community, in the hobby, to some of the other collectibles? Do you see it in the top 5, 10, given your view and your experience?
Here's the problem, though. When we look at the size of collectible markets, we actually measure it by market cap.
Okay.
So you have to look at
Okay.
also the value of some of these collectibles. Like if we talk rare coins, there's rare coins that sell for upwards of $18-19 million at present time.
Hmm.
So that market cap is significant. The problem that I have with when we look at the market cap for Pokemon, everybody combines vintage and modern.
Yeah.
That would be like me looking at the rare coin marketplace going, well, okay, the US Mint, they sell silver and gold bullion. We're putting those numbers then in with the vintage and antique stuff. And now I just exponentially increased the market cap for rare coins to the point where no other collecting category can top that.
Can even compare.
Now, that's my problem with Pokemon collectors when they don't separate out vintage versus modern.
Maybe I'll pose the question like this. How would you aggregate and formulate the market cap for Pokemon today? What would be the things you put into the bucket?
Absolutely. Well, first I would look at the most valuable cards, how much they've reached at auction, because that matters. You have to figure out that first. And then I would look at the growth of the vintage market and what's contained in that market. I would put that in the bucket. But looking at modern cards, it gets tricky because I know this is where you guys are going to disagree with me, and this is where your audience is going to push back. Not everybody who is buying this stuff is a collector. It's just like I get into this argument with video game collectors. Video game collectors will come at me and go, well, wait a minute. My niece has a Nintendo Switch and 10 games. Therefore, she's going to grow up and she's going to collect video games. A collector is born. They're not made, number one. And number two, just because you buy a Nintendo Switch and own some video games doesn't make you a video game collector. So it's very hard in a lot of these markets to pull out, well, who's actually a collector, who's just a player, and who's the guy that's just going after this stuff, throw it in a spare bedroom because he hears Pokemon's hot and hopes his investment goes up in value. That's what makes these markets difficult. So you're right. The Pokemon market is huge, but there's so many different factors. It's hard to just look at it and go, oh, the market cap's huge and it's going to keep growing exponentially. Does that make sense? You can disagree.
It does. Well, and again, there is no right answer, at least in my opinion, in some of this, because you cannot account for some of these things. So we have so many that are, I won't use your phrase. I was gonna say Timmy's, Kimmy's, and Poindexters. But they have a Switch, they have 10 games, or they bought a couple of ETBs and the binder, the Ultra Pro binder from Walmart, which is fine. That's where people start. And to us today, in this example, they're not included in the market cap. That's just, they're not there. They're not part of this calculation. And this is kind of why I asked you, how do you define it so we can understand what's left out? Because I want to understand what's not considered in this market cap. And I think part of this is going to be, we have no way to anticipate the up and coming to be collectors or even to be investors or to be whatever. They're in the hobby already. They're part of this. The hobby's big is what we're saying. But I got people buying, for example, 10 packs of sleeves, sell them in lots of 10. These are brand new sleeves from ETBs. And they buy them, they fly off the shelves every day, all day. And these probably aren't people buying $1,000 graded cards, probably. They're probably people putting together their binder and they just needed some sleeves. They wanted some cool looking sleeves and they're cheap and it's easy. But that person may be the one in a year from now who buys a $1,000 card from us. Right? Correct. And so we have no way of understanding what's been left out and what does that mean to the growth of the hobby as they mature in their journey within Pokemon or within video games or so on and so forth. Yeah.
So what I would tell you to do is look at the vintage market. You can get an assessment of the market cap just by looking at the vintage.
Yeah.
Like if you wanted to do like the WotC era,
Yeah.
that's where I would look at. What's the growth of this? What are these cards? You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because then you're seeing, because the person who's going after vintage cards is obviously a collector.
Right. They've gotten much more mature in the process. Yeah.
Exactly. So that would give you a better view, in my opinion. It's just like if we take video games, the person who's going after physical Nintendo and Super Nintendo games obviously is your collector for the most part.
Right. Right. Okay. I like that. I like that. I think we had a clarification here from Matt. So just to clarify, I would consider rarity to be how difficult an item is to acquire or how many were produced, whereas scarcity is how many are available on the market at any given time. Earlier, I think you mentioned they were one and the same.
Correct.
I think he was clear. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. It's just rarity and scarcity are the other side of the coin. Like if we look at an Action Comics 1, that can be considered rare if we really wanted to call it rare. Scarcity, let's say that there, and again, I don't know this off the top of my head, but let's say there's an item there where there's only 400 or 500 copies in total. That would be considered scarce. So it's just another side of the same coin.
Right. Okay. One more thought experiment really on the graded reports and things here in spaces of Pokemon sports. My perception, and I phrase it that way because I want you to tell me if I'm wrong. My perception is there's a lot more cracking and regrading happening where I don't see that necessarily being as prominent in video games or action figures. Do you have differences in how you've perceived grading reports accuracy across collectibles, and how do you take that into account?
Sure. Well, first of all, you are absolutely right. Certain markets are more prone to cracking than others. Coins in the early years were prone to cracking. Comic books were prone to cracking and being pressed.
Yeah, right.
Trading cards are prone to cracking because it's very easy to crack open a trading card, just send it in for grading. So certain third-party graded collectibles, by their nature, are easier to crack open and grade again. With action figures and video games, you have the added risk. Those items are bulky. They're easily damaged, especially when we look at vintage toys, especially from the 1970s and 80s that are carded. The bubbles are very fragile. The card backs are. You're taking on a lot of risk if you're doing that.
Okay. Yeah.
I will tell you, when we look at Pokemon, when we look at comic books, even when we look at coins, there's certain grades that are not being cracked. No one is cracking open a PSA 10. I think we all agree on that. There's the point. You can't get a PSA 11, and you sure as hell don't want a PSA 9 if you already have a PSA 10.
Right.
So those particular population reports are pretty stable. Everything else, you are correct, is suspect.
Yeah.
For that reason. And again, the three big hobbies: coins, comics, and of course cards. Those are the ones that are pretty much cracked the most. Even currency, believe it or not, you would think currency would be cracked open a lot. It's really not as much as coins.
I didn't realize coins were. Do you have a rule of thumb that you apply to, below the top grades? I say, well, I'm going to just by default subtract, I'm just giving a random number, 10%. Because PSA 9s, I know a lot of those got recracked. Maybe even the 9s are going to be like 20% because they're definitely going to be recracked and graded. Perhaps the 7s, not so much so, right? Maybe that's only 2 or 3%. Do you have some kind of a gauge that you give yourself to readjust the population report to give a better accuracy?
Not really, no. And let me tell you why. It's too hard to predict.
Yeah.
It's just like we can translate this, and I don't want to go off topic, but people like ask me, well, Shawn, how much should I pay for a PSA 10 versus a PSA 9? And it's like there's no magic number. It's whatever the market determines is the value of that item.
And you had a great, and I forget the term that you used, ideal grade to purchase.
Collecting grade?
Yes, that's the one. Speak to that just for the audience. That was such a great way to think about where you have a great buy-in point. And I don't think that everybody's heard that before. So it was, for me, it was the first time. I kind of intuitively felt that when I said, well, I'm not going to pay that much for a 10. It made sense, but I think you articulated it very well.
Yes, all is what the optimal collecting grade is. If you look at a population report and you look at the values of each of those grades, it's the point right before the next grade up gets exponentially higher.
Was it 2x you said, or what's that match? Yeah. Okay.
Normally, yeah, it'll start to double or triple in certain cases.
Yeah.
You get to that point, that's where you know you're getting out of the league. Or if you're going to invest, you want to invest under that point, because that also offers the best value. Because if you are able then to crack that item out and you get the next grade, you get the most value added for that as well. That's why that really came out of coin collecting. Coin collectors and dealers really put that in my head, because that was a thing back in the day.
Okay. Yeah. When I heard that, I think you were talking with Jake at Pokenomics when you mentioned that one. I was like, that's a really good way to look at it. And I didn't quite put a number on it. It was more of a feel. I was like, that much for this card and that grade. Like, it's for me, like, I'm a binder collector anyway. It's like, I don't need it to be 2 times, 3 times. I just want a decent looking copy.
That's cool.
Armstrong has a question. What collectibles category has Shawn had the most success with? Let's start with that first one.
Absolutely. Well, ironically, it would be collectibles, because we have to factor in the success of my eBay business.
So you still running it?
I still sell on eBay, but I don't go to flea markets religiously or anything. I don't do anything in the import export with video games like I did back then. When I sold the business, I actually signed a non-disclosure agreement.
Okay.
Part of that non-disclosure agreement for a period of years, which expired by now in the non-compete clause, but I couldn't compete directly with the company that I sold for obvious reasons. They were smart to put that in, to be fair, because I would have, in all honesty, just because of ego.
Well, and typically you see that for 10 years, non-competes are 10 or more years. Yeah. Okay. And what about now? What are you looking at? That's the second part of the question here.
Absolutely.
What do you see as most profitable?
Coins and currency is what I do the most money in, because I know those markets pretty well now.
And are you doing U.S. currency in coins, or are you doing foreign?
No, U.S. I stick to U.S. I do ancient, though. I've gotten into ancient coins because NGC Ancient started grading that stuff.
Oh, okay.
So
I didn't know.
New opportunity. Yeah. I don't really like world coins. I know a lot about the market. Like, I can guide people if they want to invest in like Hong Kong coins or whatever, but it's not for me, because I live in the U.S. and just it makes more sense for me to invest in the U.S. market for that reason.
Okay. Well, there you go. Coins and currency. I like it. All right. Moving a little bit on to a couple other topics. One of which I haven't heard you talk too much about, and you kind of stay away from it, but I'm not shy to open up the conversation here. It's going to be, how do you navigate your taxes in collectibles? So obviously you run a business. Now I don't know if you run everything through the business or you keep some of that personal, but okay. Do you have any specific like tax strategies, tricks of the trade, couple of mistakes made and lessons learned that you've applied when it comes to how you handle your taxes within collectibles that you could share?
The biggest advice that I give people, they don't keep accurate records. And this is the problem that I find even in my consulting business.
Yeah.
If you buy something through a dealer or a distributor or whatever, even on eBay, print out the receipt. Keep that receipt. It matters. Keep a spreadsheet somewhere, even if you just have a Google Drive, open up sheets and just keep a spreadsheet of what you're paying for stuff. You wouldn't believe how handy that comes in. So that's step one. It's all the way back to the basics.
Tracking.
Because when I brought this up on my channel, I couldn't believe the comments that I would get. Well, Shawn, I don't keep records of any of this stuff. And it's like, but you're telling me you're buying everything for investment. You're investing in this stuff. What do you mean?
How do you know if you made money or not?
It's like, wow. So that always shocks me. So that is step one. You can do, if you are running it as a legit business, you can do like tax loss harvesting, do stuff, creative stuff like that. If you want to like time the sale of something that you know you're going to take a loss on, if you made a hefty gain that you're going to have to pay taxes on, you can offset it with that. You can do more creative things with collectibles than that of financial assets that are in a brokerage house. Right. Because you also have storage costs. You can write off more expenses with collectibles than you can with financial assets. That's one of the advantages.
Yeah, and I mean, even the generic business advice typically comes in these, and feel free to add to this or correct where you see fit. You know, it's making sure that your earnings are legally tax reduced to the most you can. So again, whether it's your home space, your office, your video camera that you're using to record videos, all these things are ways that you can lower your overall gains in the year and lower your taxable income, so your capital gains, and make sure that you're only paying taxes on the smallest amount legally possible.
Correct.
That's one of the business standard ways to make sure that you don't pay more in taxes than you should. Yeah.
And I would also
Appreciate
add
you.
too, use a professional accountant, because even
Yeah.
me, I'm educated in business. I don't do my own taxes because I have
Yeah.
an emotional attack. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
more, I need another set of eyes where somebody keeps up on the laws and everything.
Yep.
And I find that that is very rewarding. If you use the right people, it pays
Yep.
for itself over and over.
Which it's a small aside there, but one of the things I've started to navigate is the differences between my accountants and CPAs that worked in standard business and some that maybe do a bit differently because they understand collectibles more. Do you try to navigate that at all and find accountants that have maybe a bit more savvy knowledge of the industry, or you just go with the standard CPAs?
I go with standard CPAs, believe it or not, because usually
Okay.
I have enough knowledge where I can ask the questions and go, well, can I do this? And usually they'll tell me if it fits the protocol,
Right.
because they don't have to know collectibles to be an accountant. Now, if you're on a side note, if you're getting insurance on collectibles, you want to use an insurance company that knows the
Right.
collectibles trade.
That's right.
For
Very
an
much so.
accountant,
Right.
or even like I talk to people in the financial world all the time, and they think I'm crazy to have 20 to 30% of my net worth in antiques and collectibles, if that tells you anything. And I come from that.
Well, and I think you made a good point there, because I've even had to do the same, and some maybe can't or aren't able to at this stage, and that is asking the right questions, because they're going to take sometimes the standard decisions and the standard practices for typical business, and if you're not asking the questions to kind of navigate, sometimes they may miss some things, not necessarily on purpose or have any malicious intentions. It's just it didn't occur to them that this was happening, or perhaps the record wasn't transparent enough to show that this could be an option in a ways to reduce your taxable income, for example. So, yeah, asking those questions is something that we take for granted as well. Yeah.
Very much so.
All right. Yeah, he says that the tax questions usually always want to be avoided. He said, I don't want to talk about tax. I don't mind. I think it's good because a lot of us are, especially have full-time jobs, who are doing this on the side, or maybe even have a side business. And
Absolutely.
if you don't do it right, you could lose a lot of money and just give it away. And why do that when there's so many people that are willing to help you?
Yep.
We talked about hoarding a while back, and I meant to ask this at the time, but I want to bring it back up now. And I wonder if you've done any research or read articles and kind of dove into this, especially again, being a consultant, the correlation between collecting and hoarding. There's a pretty strong correlation there. And what are your thoughts on the psychology and staying in a healthy place when it comes to those two things?
Absolutely. Well, the type of personality that would be attracted to hoarding, usually if you look for, and again, I want to be very clear here. I am not a licensed psychologist or psychiatrist. So honestly, if I suspect this of somebody and they want my help, I will tell them to seek out mental health. This is not something that I'm trained to handle, but I can at least look at the signs. Normally, the type of personality that you have that's attracted to hoarding, usually there is some trauma there, or they have obsessive compulsive disorder. OCD goes along with hoarding. As a matter of fact, if you're familiar with the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of
Mhm.
Mental Illness, I think we're on what, edition 5?
Yep.
It lists hoarding as related to obsessive compulsive disorder, and it also lists it as a trauma symptom. So we
Mm.
can hit both. So if you
Okay.
have somebody that is prone to that, usually it's one of those two things. And usually it affects not only their collecting, it affects their whole life.
Yep.
So there's
Exactly.
certain traits that they have where it's evident throughout how they live their lives, whether it be how they spend money, how they interact with other people, how they spend their time. You can pretty much see it. You look at it, you go, okay, that person's a hoarder, whether they realize it or not. And what people don't realize is hoarding doesn't just affect people like you see on the show Hoarders. There's a lot of people, believe it or not, that have money that actually have a secret hoarding addiction. Just because they have money, people don't realize it because they go after more expensive items. Obviously, even if you're rich, if you're going after items that cost $20,000 to $30,000 a piece, you're going to have less of those items than somebody that is storing old newspapers or candy bar wrappers in their house, right? Or soda cans.
Right. And you may also have more space to store it, so it doesn't look as bad, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, like, there's not, like, most people think of hoarding as like a show of hoarders where the person is economically disadvantaged. They're not taking care of themselves. I just want to make it very clear. It doesn't always appear like that. There are people that can live an overall normal life and still have that addiction. And the reason why I bring this up is currently in the collectible space, I'm seeing this a lot. There's people that are addicted to like shopping and spending money, and they hide it by calling everything an asset or an investment. I hear that a million times a day, where even on my channel, I'll get a comment, well, Shawn, you don't understand, it's an asset. And I have to explain to people, some assets are better than others.
Yeah. And sometimes when the assets don't even fall on a P&L, you have to, kind of almost,
Correct.
That case of lotion it's not an asset.
Correct. I very rarely see anyone get obsessed with hoarding like financial assets, because they're not physical. But there's very few people that like get obsessed with like owning shares of an S&P 500 index fund. Or
yeah, it's kind of hard to do that digitally, right? Which I think is an interesting segue. But before I do, I had a super chat. I appreciate it. Pokitino, much underrated channel. Shout out to Classics. Yeah, good to see you, Classics. Appreciate it, buddy. And Classics also wanted to show some love and said, just want to throw out a thank you to Shawn for being a voice of reason amidst the sea of overwhelming emotional investor hype-driven content, inundating the space today. So he appreciates you.
Yeah, I will say this. A lot of younger people are into Pokemon. Yeah. And the thing that I think that they have it difficult with, when you and me were growing up, we didn't have social media. For a period of time there, like I've said this before, the internet really didn't become a thing till I was already 12th grade high school. I mean, before that, we had Prodigy, if you remember Prodigy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff.
The AOL dial-up CDs used to get, yeah.
Yeah, but younger people, I think, especially in the internet era, have it especially hard. There's a ton of bad advice out there. Yeah. There's people that are really misleading younger people, telling them that it's very easy to get rich, to get wealthy overnight. There's bad dating advice, it's a lot of toxic stuff they have to wade through. So my heart does go out to those individuals.
And again, we're not the professionals in these spaces that we give some heartfelt advice on, but in this case of kids, internet, I've said it before, not necessarily too much in our podcast, but definitely in my live events. I don't let my kids have a phone. Now my son has my oldest son has an old iPhone that's very restricted, and he can play a preset list of music on it.
Wow.
And that's about it, because they can enjoy some music, but he doesn't get it all the time. He only gets it on the weekend. So they only get TV on the weekend. Now today was a snow day, so we made an exception, but only get 2 hours of video game time on the weekend. And we are finding the balance. We haven't quite mastered it, but we're finding the balance of letting them interact with the internet for school research or whatever it may be with supervision. But they don't have any free reign. Dad, when am I going to get a cell phone? Probably not for a while, son. Dad, can we watch on YouTube? Nope. I don't want you on YouTube. I don't want you on Instagram, chit chat, whatever, TikTok, you name it. I don't care. I don't want you on any of that stuff. They get to watch their restricted channel on Netflix that has, kids, certain rated things. And even then sometimes like, hey, you can't watch that. That cartoon's a little bit too much for your age. So keeping that, it's not that we want to hide them from everything. We want them to be exposed. They have to interact with it, have to know how to use technology. They have to navigate this as an adult, but they need to be kids. And you were speaking to something in one of your live discussions when I was watching, and you talked about kids don't play with action figures anymore. Like,
Correct.
my kids do.
That's
And
awesome.
so they get the toys, like they're in the room, they're playing, and they interact that with the Lego house they built, and then they bring over this big dragon, and they got their Pokemon cards to the left or to the right. And it's something I want them to enjoy. And like, hey, Dad, can I go do this at my friend's house? And no, why don't you go to your room and play with your brother, or invite your friends over to play in your room and just play toys and just what we used to do, right? So
Yes.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
a lost art.
it is. It is. All right. Keeping it moving. We talked just a second there about digital. I think that's a great point to bring up. And we spoke about the new Pokemon game that came out, Pocket. And I think more and more as we look at this, now I'm seeing, and we knew it was coming, but I'm seeing it. Now we have, for example, exclusive cards only being released on Pokemon Pocket that you can only get in that game. And so this push into the digital only collection space. I don't really count NFTs too much. For me, that's about as popular as our Bitcoin. No offense to anybody, but I don't buy any of that stuff. I don't see it. But I worry about collectibles as a digital medium and us maybe losing the physical desire. And I think it was Jake who mentioned, there's also an interesting dynamic opposite to that, which is the fact that we're moving towards digital will create the desire for the physical. What are your thoughts on where we're heading? And you can take Pokemon Pocket as an example, and of course, many other things that are currently happening in the present.
Well, I'm old school, so I don't like the digital era at all. Like, I don't like digital downloads of video games for the most
Yeah.
part. I don't like any of this stuff. I think the demand for physical media is important because it's directly correlated to collecting. And I think
Right.
it should always remain that way. That's why, like, I did not like NFTs when they first premiered. I didn't even like, I mean, I entertained it because I'm in the high-end art market, of course.
Right.
But like, I don't know if you remember Beeple. Beeple was a
Mm-mm.
digital artist that sold an NFT of his paintings, and it went for like millions of
Oh,
dollars.
right. I heard. Yeah,
And I
I heard
had
about
people
that.
coming to me asking me, telling me this is the future, and I'm like, "It's ridiculous. You can't hang it on a wall. How do you enjoy it?" I mean, it's basically a JPEG.
Right.
Could you
And
imagine if Van Gogh was alive today and sold JPEG? I mean, it's ridiculous. I don't maybe, and then people tell me I'm too old-fashioned. It's like, "Well, you're becoming a boomer." You know what I mean? You're
uh,
old.
I'm
I'm
right
like,
there with you. I'm right there with you. But I think it has a good correlation because we can even speak to this in the same way that you said people are obsessing about shares over the S&P 500. Well, why? There's a reason. And if you look deeper at that, I think the tangible has something to do with it. Now,
correct.
and this is kind of against my argument here, but there are cases where you have your storage of things that yes, you could go see it,
Mhm.
but you're not having to physically touch it, but you do have the physical asset. And maybe that's just a mental trigger saying, well, I have it, I can go see it. I did maybe hold it for 4 years in the house, and now I know it's there. But I got other things in your case. I have other, rooms that I could go and look and enjoy. And I think that's always going to be a thing. Like this whole metaverse world and like living only in the digital, I just don't see that sustainable. I mean, I think that'll be the downfall of a lot of mental stableness for sure if we go
Oh, I
that way.
agree with you. Social
Yeah,
media is already pushing us there.
yeah.
And I have a
It's
saying I
yeah,
have a saying on my channel, "Nobody gets emotionally attached to an S&P 500 index fund." And the reason
right.
why I say that is because, again, it exists in the abstract. You may like certain companies that make up the S&P 500, but nobody gets attached to it because, I mean, my God, Vanguard offers their own, Charles Schwab, you know
Mhm.
what I mean? It's just,
Yeah,
it's not something that is tangible in that sense.
fully agree. I think we're always going to need that, and I think we supplement with digital. I think digital is a supplement to what we have, but because we are physical beings, we're in the physical world. I think that will always hold supreme, in my opinion. But again, maybe we're just two old farts. We'll see.
It could be.
We'll see. Senator Mert, good to see you. I feel attacked. That's okay, buddy. Hang around. We'll get you again, at least more than once. Pokemon Classics says, so many people entering the hobby need tax business help. It shouldn't be taboo. We should be able to discuss it. But of course, always consult your experts. Yep.
Correct.
One other topic I want to talk about while we're in this space is rip and ship.
Oh,
right. Your favorite topic, Shawn. It's something that's really shifted, I think, the hobbies a good bit. Now, obviously, sports has been there for a while, but I don't know that I would easily correlate, for example, sports and Pokemon. There are some, but I think there are some differences.
right.
What are your thoughts, just more openly at first, and we'll dive deeper as needed, on the impact of rip and ship? Let's stick with Pokemon for the minute.
Sure.
And what it's doing to the hobby, supply, price, and then the future.
Well, sure. I'll start off by saying I think honestly, it's legalized gambling.
Hmm.
That's really what it is, unfortunately. So we have to start there because you have to have a discussion of what it really is. I mean, when you look at the numbers, when you look at the pull rates, even of a lot of the newest Pokemon products, I mean, the deck is stacked against you if you play that market. Now, obviously, if you enjoy the cards, that's part of the fun. If you want to own the cards and you want to collect single cards, you have to open the product.
Right.
So I'm not disputing that the product shouldn't be opening. Please don't take this the wrong way. I'm not going in that direction. I'm just saying, though, there is an element of gambling to this that we can't overlook. And
I fully agree. And it's inherent in every pack.
Correct.
And then we compound that with, live breaks. Now, there's also much like nuance in a given hobby between some of that being mature, some of it being established, even within a single collectible. I think a similar multifaceted analogy can be applied to live breaks. There's live breaks that are very heavy gambling centric. You got wheel spins and all kinds of chase the thing and you get this. And there's some that's you buy a pack and we open the pack. So there's a very basic one, and then there's an array of different things that then leads you to people switching out cards on the screen and getting into all kinds of bad behaviors. Do you differentiate those at all in your mind? Do you see them, or you just lump them all together and say it's all kind of the same? It's just variations of the same thing.
It is a variation of the same thing, but it is affecting the market, definitely.
Maybe now focus it on supply. What are your thoughts on the impact? I mean, the number of packs being ripped, the number of boxes being opened. What are your thoughts on the supply impact?
There is an impact on supply, obviously, but the problem is you also have people that are then holding the product sealed for that very reason. So it's almost counterbalanced because I have people that come to me, well, Shawn, you don't understand. I'm holding this factory sealed because they're ripping it online. And I think that this is going to go up in value as supply diminishes. It's simple supply and demand. And I can understand that. The problem is, though, then you have people on the other end that are holding the product even more. That's what happened in sports cards and still happens in sports cards.
What do you think the difference is between sports and Pokemon, if any?
I will say this, and again, this is where I'm not going to hold back. Your audience might get offended. Sports is a more mature collecting category, and they've learned from their mistakes over the years. The problem that I have with the sports card industry right now, specifically like baseball cards with the refractor, one-of-a-kind cards and all that crazy stuff, they literally learned that from the junk wax era because they overprinted everything. So now the pendulum's spun the other way. Where now, well, you can buy a premium pack of cards, you can open it, you can get a $10,000 hit or a 20, you know what I mean? Which I think is freaking ridiculous. And I think, honestly, I'm going to state this and your audience is going to disagree. I think the government should regulate it because now you're getting people that are spending serious amounts of money, legalized gambling, buying this stuff that is only helping the manufacturers and the rippers and other YouTubers that are showing this stuff being opened on their channel.
Yeah. And even I think on the sports side, because of the maturity and the time that they've had in the market in the collectible space, their demand better meets to supply this. And I think one of the things that's happened in Pokemon, because we're not ready for that.
You're not.
That's also why you walked into your Best Buy and you see the shelves the way they are.
Yeah, you're
in
not
combination
wrong.
with other things, right?
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah. Yep.
But I think at one point too, the Pokemon company's going to get this right.
Yeah.
They're going to manage this a lot better.
Yeah. Do you see live breaks staying for the long term? Do you think it's going to be a fad?
I think it's here to stay with the advent of social media, YouTube, whatnot, all these other crazy things that we've pulled into this space now. I do think, though, at some point, again, the market is going to transform again. It's going to evolve into something else. I don't know what that's going to be because I didn't expect us to get to this point either. Like if you would have told me back in when I was in my 20s doing eBay that eventually this is going to turn into this thing where one day I'm going to have my own YouTube channel and I'm going to talk, I would have looked at you like you were insane. Now kids growing up with this, that's the norm.
Yeah. It's funny how our lives change, isn't it, Shawn?
Very much so. It's very scary when you look back. Yes.
Maybe sticking a little bit on the theme right before I do. Yeah. Classic says, "No, we won't get offended. Speak freely. Those that watch Pokemon wonder, understand nuance and rationality."
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my key, I would say, go-tos. So that's why I have the 4-hour podcast. Don't worry, it won't be today, but
no, you can go longer.
Keeping on this idea of not knowing, I would love to hear from you because I think maybe your opinion, as all of our opinions really should, over time matures and changes. So what are some of the assumptions that you had early on about Pokemon, and now that you've watched the past decade unfold, you've now seen those right, wrong, maybe share some of the things you thought early on, and you kind of reassess yourself and you go, oh, okay, well, that didn't happen at all like I thought, or this is much better or much worse. What are some of those things that you had for yourself?
I'll be 100% honest with you. And first of all, I want to get this out of the way because I'm hoping more people watch this podcast and they can understand my talking points on this. That's one of the reasons why I agreed to come on this show. I honestly wish that more people in the Pokemon community would invite me on their podcasts rather than, because this is one of my frustrations, if I can please say this. Please. I will put out a video on Pokemon, and just based on the thumbnail that I use or the content in the first 4 minutes, it'll be a 30-minute video. People will look at the thumbnail, they'll watch 2 minutes of the video and get triggered. And before the video is even 3 or 4 minutes in, you know how you upload a video to YouTube and it tells you how long it's been uploaded?
Retention goes like this.
I'm getting comments or getting screamed at, and it's like, please watch the whole video. Don't judge it just on 2 sentences in a thumbnail. It drives me nuts. So I do like Pokemon. I have an emotional, nostalgic attachment to Pokemon. Okay, so I want to start there. So what I will tell you is, where was I going with this?
So we're speaking to what you anticipated, what you thought was going to be happening in Pokemon versus not.
I honestly thought during the pandemic, I didn't think that Pokemon would enter into another boom market as quickly as it did. Like the pandemic ended, and then all of a sudden it started up again, literally right now with surging sparks, prismatic evolutions. Yep. I didn't expect it to happen so quickly. Because if you look at a lot of other markets, like if we look at comic books, great at video games, they're in the proverbial toilet right now.
Right.
So it goes to the power of Pokemon that obviously there was a catalyst there that I missed. And normally I don't miss this stuff. So I kind of am a little bit hard on myself where, how come I didn't see that coming? If I'm being 100% honest.
What would have been the telltale signs, obviously looking back in 2020, as you look at it right now? What do you think? Not 2020 the year, 2020 in hindsight, that is. What do you think you should have seen that you didn't?
Well, like with the advent of Pokemon Go, I knew that was going to increase demand. Right. The COVID boom, money supply coming into the market, I knew that was going to increase demand.
Okay.
I should have been looking for something like that rather than just going, okay, it's, you know what I mean? Pokemon went through a boom. Now these markets are down. This market's probably going to go down too. And
you kind of took a breath and maybe didn't look at it as closely. Okay.
Correct. And I'm happy to admit my mistakes when they happen. You know, I've said this before. What separates an expert apart from anybody else is they're right more than they're wrong. It doesn't mean that they don't get anything wrong. It's just like an economist. You can have two economists. They can give you a different opinion. Well, one's going to be right. One's going to be wrong. It doesn't make the economist that was wrong any less of an expert because he could be right the next time.
Yeah. Very much true. Very much true. Maybe stepping back for a second. Sorry if I'm just making sure I didn't miss any questions here. You know, are you familiar with how much is being ripped and open? I mean, are you looking at some of the numbers and okay.
Yeah,
So
I want to do a video on it at some point on my channel. I've just taken a step back a little bit. I don't want to keep putting out Pokemon content, because I know that gets the numbers. And at the same time, I covered the entire antiques and collectibles trade. So I like to jump around.
Yeah. We got one from Alex. Justin, keep up the amazing content. We'll listen back tomorrow at work. No problem, my friend. Thanks for stopping in. Appreciate you. And another one, another compliment that is. Hey guys, just want to say hi to Shawn. Thanks for keeping me grounded and making me rethink collection and investing in a good way. Yeah,
you're welcome.
Like you see, nothing but good stuff here, my friend.
I'm surprised.
No, I think back to kind of maybe Matt's point in Pokemon Classics. You know, people who watch my podcast, especially 2 hours in, they know that this is a nuanced conversation. I don't have too much of a surface level discussion, so I try to go deeper. And usually, people who are watching 2 hours in, they already know that. All right, Shawn. I want to roll back a little bit now to your business and talk about what you've did and what you've been doing and what you're going to be doing next. So your consulting business kind of started out of a gentleman forcing you with $100 bribe to take a consult and open your eyes to what's possible. Share that experience, because I think it's quite a good one to see when opportunity smacks you in the face. Proverbial stale donut, right?
Well, I've always been like I'm the type where I'm very private. I never would have anticipated having any type of YouTube presence, anything on social media. That really wasn't my cup of tea. So what happened was back in 2013, I started writing for Antiques and Auction News. And believe it or not, that came out of my experience on eBay. eBay at the time, a little bit before that, allowed you to write guides.
Right.
So I would start writing these guides on antiques, collectibles, collectible finance. And they kind of developed a following of their own, where people were like reaching out to me, asking me if they could like reproduce the content that I was publishing. Like they wanted to put it either in their store. They had like a business and they wanted to print out the articles and put them on display or something.
Wow.
So it was like, okay, I guess I have something here. So somebody connected me with Antiques and Auction News, and they were looking for somebody to write articles. And I gave them a couple of my samples, and that's how I got into that. That was another thing that I never anticipated, because they told me I had to email this particular individual. And I said, there's no way they're going to take a nobody, because at that time I was a nobody, and, allow me to write for their publication without any type of like heavy restrictions or whatever. Well, it turned out where they were like, they gave me complete editorial freedom to just write about within reason anything in the antiques and collectibles trade.
Those must have been some good guides.
Well, I didn't tell them at first. Like, I wanted to tell them, hey, I'm going to be focusing on collectible finance. But I thought if I told them that, they'd be like, well, we have second thoughts.
Right.
Because usually, I hate to say this, publications in the antiques and collectibles trade like to cheerlead their own industry.
Of course. Yeah.
So anytime that you're a little bit critical, where if you're criticizing a certain collecting category, or you're telling people, hey, this market's possibly in the toilet, or if you're thinking of investing in this long term, you'd probably be better off with an index fund, that's considered taboo. That's considered very controversial.
You mean your entire YouTube channel?
Another thing you don't want to do, and I've learned this, you don't want to criticize certain industries. Like if you talk negatively about auctioneering, if you start talking about the secrets that auctioneers use, the tricks of the trade, that can be seen as somewhat negative.
Right.
So there are certain subjects that you really shouldn't talk about. That's one thing that I learned. That's really why I also started a YouTube channel. Because if you notice, I don't know if you read my work through Antiques and Auction News, but I never mentioned my YouTube channel by name. That's done on purpose.
You keep a lot of it separate. Even your Facebook, you don't talk about anything else. Like it's all separate, right?
No, I keep. Yeah, I try to.
Yeah.
I do that on purpose because I don't want it to be seen as a conflict of interest. I also don't want Antiques and Auction News to say, well, you're using us to prop up your YouTube channel.
Right.
So there is a fine line there where I keep. Plus, I'm also worried if I say something like some of my Q&As. I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but I'll tell you this. Some of my Q&As that I do on my channel, I go into stuff like dating and, you know what I mean? And I don't, like, if I say something a little bit off color, I don't want, like, Antiques and Auction News to say, well, we're now associated with that.
Right.
I try to keep it all separate for that reason, too.
You do a pretty good job of that. I don't see any bleed over. As I was looking through certain things, I'm like, well, this is, for example, on your Facebook page, it's a completely different set of content. Like,
yeah, I'm a little too vocal in the politics. I will admit that is something that I have to work on, especially in this.
Yeah, man, it's you be you. Nothing. I wasn't offended at all, but I was like, okay, well, there's not much research I need to do here. I mean,
I think it just says in my bio, consultant in the antiques and collectibles. I think
that's it.
YouTuber, that's it, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. So when did that first $100 forced transaction take place? So we got it to the point where now you're a columnist.
Yes, correct. So I started writing for Antiques and Auction News, and I was like, I think like 8 or 10 columns in, and this is like every 2 weeks. So this is a couple of months, and I get this message through LinkedIn, and it was somebody that I didn't even recognize. And usually, you know, LinkedIn nowadays, if you get a message, it's usually some type of marketing gimmick or something like that.
Somebody wants to sell you something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, back then, that really wasn't a thing yet, because this is right when LinkedIn got off the ground. And I get this message, and this person's like, hey, I read your articles. I'm hoping you can help me. I want to get involved in the rare coin marketplace. And I have significant money to spend. And immediately I thought, this is a scam. So I ignored the guy, right? The first time. A week goes by, I get another message. Can you please at least respond to my message? I don't want to sell you anything. I'm just hi. So I email him back, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm a columnist. I really don't do much else in the antiques and collectibles trade at present time. I sold a business, got back into corporate America. I'm just writing right now and really into writing. And he says, well, can I at least speak to you on the phone? And I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. So I read over his LinkedIn profile, and it turns out the dude's an executive. So it is legit. I Googled him. I looked everything up. So I'm like, okay, this probably isn't going to pull me into anything bad as long as I set proper boundaries.
Right.
So I call him, and he was really sincere. He just says, look, I'm just trying to find somebody honest. If I go through a dealer, or if I go through an auction house, I'm worried they're going to mislead me because they represent their own interests.
Exactly.
I said, well, I can help you. What do you want to know? And he wanted me to do market research on coins for him. So I think I told him, I said, you know, I've never really done anything like this. Let me get back to you. And I think I was going to like bill him $50 or something. And he ended up sending me, I think it was like 200 or something. It was like several bucks that he threw at me. And I was like, do you want like a refund? It didn't take me that long to do this. And like I sent it to him, and he thought the information was great. So he just said to me, you know, you should consider becoming a consultant or something in this space. You have a lot of knowledge. And I said, I'll think about it. Well, before I knew it, he then started referring me to other people. So now I get all these messages in LinkedIn. People are trying to hunt me down. You know, I'm a private person. So now they're like looking for my personal email address and all this.
No.
So I said, okay, I think I found something here. And I try to be very honest and fair with my rates, because I have people that reach out to me that make millions per year. And I have people that reach out to me that make $20,000 to $30,000 per year that just inherited a collection.
Right.
So I don't want to rip anybody off, because I truly do enjoy doing this. So I have very low rates, but that's how I got into it. It was completely by accident. It was just people kept reaching out, asking for advice on this stuff and the markets. And I was like, okay, here, I'll charge you $50. I think I started at $50. I think I'm now at, I think my hourly rate $60 an hour is what I really charge.
Wow. Okay.
So it
You're
really
very
has
affordable.
gone up. And I have some people that just like, it always cracks me up, because I can tell the people who have like more money than time.
Right.
Like I'll have people that'll like book an hour call, and we'll be on it 20 minutes and they'll be like, okay, thanks, Shawn. I got what I need. I got to go. And they'll hang up the phone. I'll be like, do you want a refund for the difference? No, keep it. I don't care. I'm like, okay, this is weird because I'm used to working now on YouTube. You know,
Right.
I don't mean to sound rude here, but I do occasionally get that person where like the hour's up and the phone call, they still want to ask questions. Then I have to kind of set a boundary. Okay, we can go an hour and 15. I'll give you the extra. You know what I mean? Because I feel bad.
Right.
But then you have some people that like will keep me on the phone, try and, you know what I mean? Hour and a half, 2. It's like I have to set like a time limit with those.
Wonder how you feel about this one right here. Right now. It's like, yeah, God, we're 2 hours and 5 minutes and he's still going.
I mean, no, in those situations,
I'm joking.
I know. That's how I got into it. And even then in 2013, I mean, I was doing this behind the scenes, literally all the way up until I started the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel came out of, and I'm going to get a little bit personal here. I was in the dating world, we'll word it that way. And I had several bad experiences and somebody really hurt me. And I needed a way to deal with all the emotions in that I was dealing with. Yep. So I remember coming down here and I would do my consulting work and I would turn on the camera and I would just go off on a rant about collecting categories or something.
I think this is what, 2019, right?
Yeah, this is like June of 2019, June or July. And I figured if I would upload one to YouTube, let's see what would happen. And lo and behold, I honestly thought I'd be deleting the channel within 6 weeks or 6 months. Lo and behold, though, it was really the video game community that made me. Because this was also at the time when WADA came on the scene.
Right.
And I was criticizing the unauthenticity of that particular period, what happened, what led up to it. And Pat the NES Punk reached out, Carl Jobs, and then I was part of that video. Right. And that's what really
skyrocketed
my channel to get to the next level. Because as you know, if you're building a YouTube channel, it's very difficult even to get past 1,000 subscribers. I mean, it's a grind at that point because pretty much everyone's tried it or everyone's doing it. There's so much content out there.
Yep. Very much so. It's not easy.
Yeah. Correct. So that's pretty much the story of how this came to be. And even certain days, I'll be honest with you, there are certain days, like I am human. I don't think that people sometimes realize that on the internet. Where like there are people that really cut me up. I got death threats there for a while. I mean, it was pretty bad. Because people really take it to heart. Like they think that I'm attacking them or they think I'm going to cause their collecting category to go to 0 somehow. And then they worry they're going to get weird.
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk more about influence of the influencers here in a little bit. Yeah. But it is some emotional attachment back to what they feel so strongly about. And I can understand that.
Correct. Because even now, I will put out a video sometimes, and just the reaction I get, it's like, geez, do I delete the channel? Is this over? It's almost like I don't have to worry about cancel culture because I'm probably going to cancel myself at some point.
It's like, I just pick whatever video and just finally post it, and it's fine. Like they will cancel me. We had one here when we were on the topic of being reassured. That's one of the problems in Pokemon. So many people are so dependent on affirmation that they aren't aware of their own confirmation bias and react emotionally in different perspectives. Yeah, fully agree. Yeah, and we get in this bubble, and I think we spoke about it earlier just briefly, but when you say things like young kids aren't collecting coins, it's like, no, the kids you're talking to aren't collecting coins. So we're just stuck in this little bubble. Even when we think we diversify, you're within the Pokemon community. We're telling each other a lot of the same things, and we watch the same content, and the YouTube algorithms pumping the same thing to us, and we have to actively seek out that other opinion and the other view, which is exactly why I would love to have this conversation with you and bring some color to the conversation and help us see some different points of view. So appreciate that.
Birds of a feather tend to flock together.
Exactly. All right. So you're now an official consultant. You're a columnist. Are you doing anything else? Because those two things are both still active. Do you have a full-time job in addition to this? You do still. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is it in finance, or you don't have to give me detail, but is it in collectibles industry or?
No, it's actually in records management.
Really?
I do it because I can work from home. So
Okay.
it's convenient for me.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. But
All right.
yes,
So I thought by this time you would have been full-time, either consultant slash columnist slash YouTuber.
I have thought about it, but in all honesty, I can juggle all of it, and it doesn't really phase me. I hate to say that because it makes me sound like a superhuman, but like my problem is I have somewhat of an obsessive addictive personality, and I can be addicted to work. So
Okay.
like I can work 14 hours a day, go to the gym twice a day in that period, and it doesn't phase me. Whereas other people are like, whoa, I'm burned out.
Right.
And it's something that I really enjoy. Like I believe it or not, I enjoy my corporate job, and I also enjoy, of course, the antiques and collectibles trade. I can just keep going. Really, I would be, from a financial standpoint, I would be better off if I got back into finance and did this in addition to it. Finance would pay me better than my corporate job does now.
But it may have more demands on you.
Correct. And I probably couldn't work from home. So I'd have to go into an office. I'd have to deal with certain people and personalities that I got to work from. Because if you know anything about finance people, they can be very stubborn and, how can I say this, a little bit egotistical, arrogant.
Rigid.
So
Dealing
with that isn't something that I look forward to. But I have thought about pulling back, like maybe quitting my corporate job and doing this full time. That is a possibility. Because I was self-employed before. When I sold my business, I did that.
Right.
I go through these weird spurts where we're like, okay, I'm getting out of this. I'm going back into corporate America. Don't want to bother with that. That's why, like, I was able to put away, kind of compartmentalize the antiques and collectibles trade for this time. But I guess, though, now with being on YouTube, I realize interacting with so many different people and also seeing a plethora of different content and some of the mistakes that people made, that there is a need, or at least I should say a voice like mine in this space, whether you agree with me or not. I think it does serve a purpose.
And I'll second that. And it's not just because you're here today in front of me, but it's not just that voice is needed. And I think the key difference here, Shawn, is that the voice with the experience and knowledge to back it up is needed. There's a lot of people saying things. They may say even the same thing as you. But when they don't have the expertise to back it up, it just doesn't hold the weight. It just doesn't give the same value. And they may get to the point you're at one day, but not many kids are learning antiques and collectibles at 12. So, I mean, they have a long ways to go. So it's something that we do need, and we appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I was a really weird kid, so I guess it paid off.
Right. Look who's laughing now.
Why did those sports cards go to zero?
Somebody's got to explain this to me. Mom, take me to every place here around town. I need to see him. I need to talk to him. Yeah, just leave me with the old guy at the flea market. I'll talk to him for a while.
I will say this. When I started my YouTube channel, I made one promise to myself, that I would never create content that I truly didn't believe in. So if I ever felt that I was giving like clickbaity advice, or if I was giving toxic advice just to appeal to a YouTube algorithm, I would immediately shut down the channel, because I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. And that's something that out of 500 and some videos, that is something that I will say, and I hope I'm not sounding elitist on this, but that is something that I'm most proud of. All the advice that I ever gave, even if people didn't agree with it, it was from my heart and my mind, and I meant it.
Yeah, and I've had lots of comments and conversations about this. I feel in many ways the same, at my own detriment. So I'd rather do what I enjoy, this right here, having a great conversation with great people in and outside of the hobby, and sharing that with community in as much depth and nuance as we feel is appropriate, which, by the way, I think we're missing proper conversation in today's society, but we'll get to that later. And so doing that, I know that my audience isn't going to be massive at 3-hour podcast, and people aren't going to listen to all of this, and that's okay. But I think it does reach some people, and I think it's something I enjoy, and it comes from the heart, and I enjoy doing it. And so to your very point, I don't want to do the things just to make the algorithm tick. I'd rather not. I'd just rather not. Yeah.
I'm lucky because I'm not like a techie, so I'm very naive. unlike the YouTube algorithm. Like I'll have a video that goes viral and I'll be like, what the hell happened with this? I recorded it in 15 minutes with bad hair, bad lighting, and now I'm plastered all over the damn internet. But yet the video that I plan, you know what I mean? Like if I come back from a date or something and I look really spiffy,
Yeah.
the video does nothing.
Yep. No. It's so weird. The things you don't think will do well is the ones that just rock it. iPhone says, I've watched all 500. I can vouch for that. All 500 of your videos, that is.
My God, you're going to need therapy. God bless you.
Just keep watching. Just keep watching, buddy. All right. So one of the things I also wanted to kind of get your thoughts on, because there's not, as I said in the opening, there's not many people who have the breadth and array of knowledge that you have. And you kind of touched it already in that you can keep going. You love what you do, gym twice a day, and work 14. But I have a hard time just keeping up with the nuances of Pokemon by itself. No other hobby. Now, granted, I have to run the business, which takes a lot of my time. But outside of that, I mean, how do you manage to really stay upbeat with so many collectible hobbies, so many different places? I mean, the news alone, I don't know how you would keep up with it. So what's your process? You just running videos all the time in the background? You're constantly reading? What's the way you stay in tune?
Well, sure. Well, first of all, once you can properly assess one collecting category, you can pretty much apply those same fundamentals to other collecting categories with few differences. When we get in the antique side of the equation, yeah, there's a little bit of a learning curve, couple of idiosyncrasies that are different than collectibles in those markets. But for the most part, once you learn how to analyze one market, you can pretty much analyze another. So I'm very lucky in the fact that most of the publications in the news that I get is geared towards the entire antiques and collectibles trade. So I don't just stay focused on Pokemon or video games or comic books. I get my news sources from all of those different markets. And if something stands out, usually I'll take some time and I'll analyze that and see, okay, what happened here? Like I'll give you an example. Back in 2000, when CGC started grading comic books, or right around 2006, 2007, when CAC started stickering coins, those were major catalysts in those markets.
Okay.
So I had to keep abreast of that.
What's the way you bring all that news in, though? Are you in a bunch of RSS feeds, or what are you doing now? What AI robots giving you the highlights?
No, there's certain auction sites, there's certain news organizations. Like I write for an auction news, so naturally I'm subscribed to that publication. So I get all this information funneled to me. And it's my job to go, okay, this isn't relevant. This isn't going to matter or anything. And I'm kind of lucky because once you learn to analyze markets from a financial perspective, most of the auction houses that cater to like Pokemon also cater to video games, comic books, coins, currency, traditional antiques.
Okay.
I will tell you where it gets difficult is the antique side. That takes a lot of knowledge and time. Because keep in mind, if you want to analyze the market for bottles, like bottle collecting, believe it or not, is a very popular market on the antique side. Well, there's no third-party grading. And there's like 3 main auction companies that cater to that market, and they're all doing different things. So when I analyze those markets, they take much more time than the collectible market. Yeah, it's more of a deeper dive.
Okay. And I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sure. Same thing with art. Art is a major time sink. If you want to learn the art market, first edition collectible books, historical documents, even guns and edged weapons.
Right.
That has a lot of idiosyncrasies. That can be complex.
And well, let me start with, once you have the foundation with a lot of these, and you've done your initial research and you understand the history and you're kind of quote unquote caught up to the present, it's a lot easier to just sprinkle in a few of the highlights of the weeks and see what happens and dive in as needed. I think getting that breadth of knowledge, up to that point, to be up to speed, so to speak, is probably one of the hardest parts. But I'm sure that you also collect massive amounts of information, data points, things you want to come back to, refer to. Do you have any special tools, websites, resources that you could share with the community and say, hey guys, here's a couple of really cool tools or sites that I use to track X, Y, and Z, or to measure this or to analyze that?
Absolutely. Well, first, I do spend a lot of time on auction sites, just
Okay.
looking through completed sales history.
Okay.
I will do this on eBay as well, but I take eBay as a grain of salt, only because the data can be manipulated more so than auction data. Don't get me
Okay.
wrong. There are cases where auction companies will sometimes, how do I want to say this, conveniently delete low sales data of certain items. That does happen. That is a thing that's well known. So you have to take that into account. That's why really I like to participate in like if a live auction is going off, I will right away start documenting some of the results.
So you can compare.
Yeah, so I can make
Yeah.
sure that it's fresh and I have it. I'm guaranteed to have it no matter what.
Okay.
That can take a lot of time depending on the auction. Now, I don't do that for every single collecting category. But if it's something that I'm really following, or if a client comes to me and wants some information, I will spend some time
Okay.
following that. Another thing, there are certain websites that I will visit. I'll give you one. Collectors Weekly is one. Collect, if you ever heard of that, it's spelled different. I think it's CLCT, if I remember correctly. I have it saved.
CLCT.
I have to try. Hold on.
Collect. Okay. Collect.org.
Yes.
Okay.
That's one.
Yeah, I see it here. Okay.
I actually use, for price research, I do use sites like Go Collect,
Okay.
GP Analysis,
Yep. Yeah, I've heard of that one.
PCGS Coin Facts, because it's free. Yeah, coin collectors get it lucky. We get all pricing data pretty much free. It's a
Wow.
more mature, sophisticated market.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, they're
And
okay.
most of the sources they're pulling from are from auction sites?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Go Collect, I find I actually like better than GP Analysis right now. Because Go Collect also covers other markets too. It's not just comic books.
Okay. I didn't realize that. Okay. All right. So pondering some of those, combine it with the news, and then making some analysis. Do you have any tools that you use, or you just like a straight Excel type of person and
I use
run
Excel.
some numbers? Okay.
Yeah, I
All
run
right.
numbers, and then I keep a spreadsheet if needed. Because like if I'm
Okay.
doing a video on like, well, let's talk about the graded video game market. Here's some highlights. Here's items that fell in value. I have to keep all
Right.
that separate. So
Okay.
I
All
have
right.
it with me.
Do you feel like there's a need for a new software, a new app in the space to kind of bring some of this together? You feel like you're maybe spending too much time on things you wish would just be aggregated?
It'll be interesting to see what AI does in this space, because I can guarantee, just like the advent of Go Collect and GPA analysis, I'm sure that somebody is already thinking, hey, what can we do with auction data now that we have AI at our disposal?
Right.
So it's only a matter of time before something new hits the market. I do wish, though, that the antiques and collectibles trade wasn't so fragmented.
In which way?
I wish that there were more like well-known sources where all this data, where any news happenings or anything could be thrown out there, where like everybody visited. Like whether you were a sports card collector, a coin fanatic, a Pokemon collector, a comic book, where you all went for this information. Because I can even tell you, like one of the things that I was surprised about, and this happened to me when I first came on YouTube. I was amazed at how many people do not read publications in the antiques and collectibles trade. Like even if you're in Pokemon, it's almost like people are in their own bubble. And if it's not about Pokemon, they won't look up that information. That's why, like on my channel, I always tell people, if you want to learn collectible finance, read these books. And I go through these books, and I'm amazed at the feedback I get. Well, Shawn, those books don't have anything on Pokemon, or maybe you're in video games. And it's like, to learn collectible finance, you got to learn the basics. It doesn't matter about the collecting category. That comes later.
Right. You apply it after you learn the foundations, right?
Correct.
Exactly.
Now, if you come to me and you want to learn like antique porcelain or something, I can tell you where to go to learn it, but you also have to put yourself out there in that market. You're going to have to interact with people, auction houses. And that's why,
good. I'm sorry.
That's why, like I always say, the barrier to entry on collectibles is much easier than antiques. Antiques, I hate to say it, in this world, it's a bitch to learn. Unless if somebody doesn't literally throw it in front of you and take you out and show you how to learn those markets, you're not going to be able to do it online. Like I always call people that watch like Pawn Stars and American Pickers and Antiques Roadshow. I call them armchair antique experts because you have to get out there and be exposed to this stuff. It's the only way you're going to learn it.
I love it. Well, we can't all be the 12-year-old, beating down the door of the old man. It's hey, you got to teach me. You got to teach me. It's one of those industries, and especially as things like this continue to get more and more maybe sophisticated or matured, it's even harder to get into than it was 20, 30 years ago. It's more and more difficult. It's funny you mentioned the books, because one of the things I wanted to maybe hear a recap from you on is the top 5 books that you would recommend us collectors take a look at and read. Yeah, please.
1 second.
You got them right there. This was not prepared ahead of time, ladies and gentlemen. One of which I bought recently per your recommendation.
Okay, we'll start with the one that caused the most controversy when I first announced it on my channel, where it caused this book. This book used to be like available if you could find it for like $5. I recommended it on my channel, and it like shot up to like $60 on the secondary market. Now I think it came back down because I haven't brought it up that much. This is How to Make the Most of Your Investments in Antiques and Collectibles. And it's written by Harry Ranker, who's an expert in the trade, well known, in his 80s now. He's retired. But it's the first
He's a friend of yours.
It's the first insider's guide to manipulating the antiques and collectibles market to maximize your investment. This book, when it first came out, like it sold well, but it was amongst hardcore adopters, meaning the people that were really in this. My mentors gave me a copy of this. And that's how I first discovered it. But it's amazing that no one knew about this book until I started bringing it up on my channel. And I'm like, it's amazing. All these people are claiming to invest in these markets, but they never read any of the books that I bring up that are like teaching the basics. So this is first and foremost. It still applies to this day. The thing you got to keep in mind, if you're going to read this book, it was written in a pre-internet era. So it kind of reads like stereo instructions, because remember, a lot of the strategies that we would employ today were not put in place then, because now we have the internet and social media. I honestly have thought about, if I ever get time, I would love to write books on antiques and collectibles and investing in this market. And I honestly had thought about doing something where I take some of the lessons of this book, because it wouldn't be plagiarism, because these are well-known lessons, and expanding on them in the modern era with social media, YouTube, and the like. I just haven't had time to focus that much on writing a book.
I think we would all love to see it.
That would be an idea. The second book, and this is well worth reading. I don't care if you're on the antique side, the collectible side. Killer Stuff and Tons of Money.
That's the one I just bought.
What makes it spectacular is the person that wrote this book has no knowledge of the antiques and collectibles trade. She had a friend who goes by a synonym, Kurt Avery, who is well in the trade, that she follows around, and she figures out how he succeeds in these markets. The negative thing about this book, the one bad thing, it was written during the financial crisis. So it paints a picture where the antiques trade is completely dying, which really isn't true. Changing, but it's not dying. But if you read this book, you will have a great understanding of how collectible finance works from somebody who does it each and every day. That's why I recommend this book. That's why I bought that one. Third book that I recommend, and this, I will warn you, this is a finance-heavy textbook. So this is an expensive book because it's a college textbook. But if you read it and you take the time to understand it, it's going to help you. Just, it does have, like if I open it here, there's a lot of graphs. There's a lot of formulas. It's a lot of hardcore information because it is a college textbook. This is all collectible investments for the high net worth investor.
I think I've heard that one before.
It's worth reading, but again, if
it's a lot.
I will say, if you struggle with finance, this probably isn't the first book that you're going to want to go to. What are we at? Fourth book? Picker's Bible. Book. You cannot go wrong with this. This is from somebody that started from the ground up, goes to flea markets, yard sales, looks for items to flip. He shares his secrets. This is the second edition. Second edition is what I recommend. The final book actually has nothing to do with antiques and collectibles. Shocking. It has nothing to do with finance either. It's called Contingencies of Value. Now, I want to warn you, if you read this book, you're probably going to be banging your head against the wall.
Critical theory.
What this book does is it looks at how we value things in our society. And this is where we
I
get
like
to the
that.
talking point where things that have no underlying cash flows, how do you value these items? Well, it's one part cultural relevance, how we view the item, how it's viewed in our society, and it's another part economics. And that's what this person does. It's more of a literary analysis.
Okay.
How we assign value to certain objects in our culture and society. So, for instance, if we would take Pokemon and we would put it in an alien civilization, they would not value Pokemon the way that we do. And as a matter of fact, the cards would possibly be worthless in that culture.
Right.
That's what this looks at, how culture impacts what we value. I will tell you, don't go to the market and buy this, though, until you read the other 4, because this reads like stereo instructions. It is literally a very boring book on just value in general.
Oh, it was funny because I was like, man, this sounds like my favorite one so far. I might have to buy that one first or read that one first. But yeah, I guess I'll wait until number 5.
Correct.
Very good. All right. Thanks for sharing those. I know I was wondering if you had thought about writing your own book, and you mentioned there. So maybe you'll let that tug on your heartstrings a little bit and see what happens.
I will. If I was retired, I would. Like in my older years, I probably will.
Which is interesting that you bring that up. When we talk about collectibles, we talk about, the things that you've amassed over the years and the refinement of your collection. There was a time you spoke about how this will change as you get older, and how you start to shift. And you've spoken about as well the generic statement of what we think is important changes as we get older. For sure. Right. How do you see transition in your collection as you go from 47 to 57 and then 67 and beyond? What do you plan to do as you get older? Are you trying to say, well, I got to whittle it down from the financial perspective? It's going to go from 30 to 20 to 10 to 5. Or do you have a different plan?
I'm going to give you some controversial advice that every collector hates.
Okay.
If you're a collector, I think it's your responsibility to attempt to dispose of your collection, meaning sell, give away, whatever, while you're still alive. I don't think it should fall on the heirs that are left behind, because you had an emotional attachment to it. There's a reason why you bought those pieces, and you know the collection more than anybody else. So this is what I always tell my clients. I will never, ever get mad if you say, well, you know what, Shawn, I don't want to do that. I can't do it. I'm going to leave it to my kids, my wife, my niece, whoever is alive. I will never, ever tell you not to do that. But I personally think it is the responsibility of the collector to have enough, how do I want to say this? What's the right word here? Intuition, to realize that these pieces that we all collect and cherish, they're going to outlive us, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah.
In most cases. Okay. Unless if you collect something really weird. If you collect things, that's a different story. I've encountered people that collect exotic animals or weird plants, whatever. But for the most part, this stuff is going to outlive us. So I really believe it's the responsibility of the collector to dispose of it how they see fit. So as I get older, I don't want to be in a position where if I become incapacitated, or heaven forbid, if I die or get a disease, I want to make sure that I'm the person that takes on that responsibility and is able to at least capture as much, whether I want to donate or sell it, I can decide what I want to do with it. And then I can decide who gets that money.
Right. Yep.
So
my grandmother's taken a similar approach.
Okay.
Yeah. She's gotten older. She's 89 now. It probably doesn't help that I just got her collecting Pokemon cards, but it's beside the point. She's been like slowly getting rid of her stuff little by little and making sure she's either assigned it to somebody who actually wanted it or has gotten rid of it, just so she can clear things out, because she knows I'm going to have to go in take care of things when she's gone. So she's taken the past 10 years and just kind of slowly worked on it and slowly gotten rid of the stuff. And there's still stuff there, but yeah, I think she's done the most important parts. What's next for you in terms of business and career and life? What's some of the big things on the horizon? Is it the book? Do you have some other big things planned that you haven't shared yet that you want to achieve as you start to move into the next coming years?
There's things that I'm thinking about. Yes. Like I said, the YouTube channel took me off guard. Like I didn't expect. I thought I would be one of the ones that deleted it. So I'm still in shock. Like I keep thinking, and this is probably just the way that my mind works. I keep thinking that this is going to end tomorrow somehow. Yeah, like I remember like when I would get death threats or something, I'm like, oh my God, this I gotta just go away.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, you had a reaction video that kind of hit you pretty hard too, like when you first started, right?
Correct.
Somebody made a reaction video to you.
Correct. Well, that's common now. Like I think that a lot of people, like a lot of the top Pokemon YouTubers, have already made a reaction video of me somewhere out there. Or they, you know what I mean? They like edit my face or do something stupid.
Like they comment something. Yeah.
I've seen some of that. There was a guy that really freaked me out. I will tell you this story. I did a like a calibration like we're doing, I think, with Sports Card Dad. I don't know if you know who that is.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Not Shawn, but yeah, I know who he is. Yeah.
Yeah, and somebody really like latched onto my content, and he was like a YouTuber that had like 3,000 subscribers or something. He was and I think I said something about Michael Jackson in one of my Q&As, and I didn't mean to offend anybody. It just came up in conversation.
I watched that one. I know which one you're talking about. Yeah.
And he latched onto it, and he kept doing these videos about me, like reserved investments exposed and all this stuff. And I didn't want to like respond to it because I thought, okay, this is creepy. I don't even know this guy. But like, I think the video is still up, and it like has like 100 and some views or something.
Right.
And like, one thing that I will do is I don't watch reactionary content about me, and I don't respond to it because I think that that's more healthier. And usually when you ignore a troll, that enrages them even more.
Right.
So that's pretty much my theory on that. I figure if somebody can't, you know what I mean, send me an email or face me directly and say, hey, I have this question or criticism, why should I give them the time of day in that regard?
I would agree with you. And it doesn't help you. In fact, you can use it like Rudy does. It's just free marketing. So
correct.
Appreciate it.
And that's why too, when I started my YouTube channel, I said, I don't want to do reactionary videos. I don't want to, you know what I mean?
Right.
Get involved in that drama where, well, somebody's doing it now, I got to respond back, and then we go back and forth, and now we have this stupid feud.
It's not healthy.
No,
it's not healthy. No. It's not a place I want to live in mentally. I'll say that. Yeah, I'd rather not. I'll just pass. I just won't do it at all. Yeah, because you started, YouTube in 2019, as you mentioned earlier. I saw that you have Patreon. How does that work for you? Do you still like it? Is it really helping the business, or is it more just kind of like a side habit and it kind of does a little bit here and there?
It's just a side thing. Like I won't, I'm still conflicted on this because I know that people that have Patreon accounts will sometimes upload exclusive content.
Right.
I don't do that. What I do is you can message me anytime, and if you give me 3 days to respond, I'll gladly answer your question.
Right.
That's my agreement with Patreons. Patreon for me was something that I really didn't want to start. I started it simply because I had people reaching out. Hey, I really like your work. How can I help support it? How can I let you know that it's valued so that you continue to make more? That was really the thing.
Okay.
So I said, okay, I'll start something, but at least I want to give you something in return. If you have a question about, whatever, antiques, collectibles, finance, feel free to message me. Just give me 3 days to respond, and I'll respond back.
I like that. It's a good place to start, and you don't have to do exclusive content. I've thought about it myself, but I have a hard time just keeping up with what I already have. So I don't want to add another thing to the table. So I'll wait for now. I'm not even doing a good job on my other platforms, so I have to just pick all that up. Do you have other platforms outside of YouTube and Patreon?
No, I only actually have social media wise, Facebook with limited capacity, and LinkedIn.
Okay.
There's been people, like, I always laugh, like in the dating scene, like women will be like, well, don't you have an Instagram? And I'm like, no. They don't believe me. Like, what is wrong with this guy? Is he like going to cheat on me, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not something that I probably at some point will bite the bullet and do something like that. Because even if I would go like the Instagram route, I don't have to put it in my name. I can put it in reserved investments and do something
Exactly.
like that. And then just say, well, yeah, I use it for my business.
Right.
Then it's excusable.
Well, and to be fair, until I started this journey, I did have Facebook, but I had deleted it. I didn't like it. I didn't like what was happening there, so I actually got rid of it, or got rid of it as best as you can. And then when I started this journey in business and promoting, like I had to have some way to promote everything. So I got on everything, and man, what a difference! It's a lot. Like being on every platform versus being on nothing is such a drastic difference. And I wasn't a big social media fan to start with, so it's tolling to be on all the platforms and all the messages. And I need to do it. I understand that, but it's not easy. Life was a lot simpler when you had no social media, right? When we were kids. Yeah, it's a lot easier. Do you have any goals for your YouTube channel? Anything that you want to change there, or some growth that you want to have in that space? Or is it just keep the status quo and post a couple of videos a week? Or
if it gets to a certain point, I'm probably going to have to do something with editing.
Okay.
Because I suck at like tech. I suck at like YouTube. And I think at a certain point, like what I would like to do is like do a video where I show people how I analyze like auction sales, how I look at price points. In order to do that, like I would have to share my screen and do a whole bunch of stuff that I don't know how to do right now.
Okay.
To be honest. So I think if it grows, if it gets to a certain point, like I have a number in mind, at that point, I'm probably going to have to go the editing route, maybe hire someone to do something. But I don't know if it'll get to that point. So I might get lucky. I may get out of it.
I don't know. Have you seen this open up doors for you, though? Much like your early eBay guides open up some doors for you. Has YouTube and social media opened up some experiences for you and connections that you wouldn't have had otherwise?
Oh, absolutely. Like I do get like calls from the media from time to time. Or like I'll be asked to comment on something. I've been a guest on radio shows on antiques and collectibles.
Nice.
So yeah, people know who I am.
Good exposure. Okay.
Yes. I was quoted once in the wonderful New York Times video game bubble article.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
I didn't see that one.
Speculative market. Get out of it. And that was like one of the quotes that they used, something like that. I forget what I said. And they're like, "That's it. That's all that I'm telling you." And like that one quote was pretty much Shawn Surmick of Antiques and Auction News said this. Like, geez. So yeah.
Yeah, it does give some interesting opportunities from time to time, though. But yeah, especially where you are in the space that you're in, I couldn't imagine there's hundreds and thousands of people that do exactly what you do. I think it's probably quite small, right?
No, as a matter of fact, that's one thing that bothers me. Like when I was a big fan of Harry Rinker, and I was really upset when he retired because there's very few people that have this plethora of knowledge. And if you try to teach them collectible finance, like we've discussed, they get emotionally attached and they don't want to hear it.
Right.
So what I worry about is then this is really what puts pressure on me to probably want to write a book. What happens after I leave the space? Because all my mentors, they're pretty much either dead or pretty much close to it. I hate to say that.
And friends in the space, they don't do the same? That are your age, that is? No.
Very few. They're more on the business side of it where they you know what I mean? They specialize in a market.
Right.
What I did was completely insane. It honestly, one of the things that I wish when I started my channel, I wish somebody would have told me this. The YouTube algorithm rewards you when you actually specialize on a certain type of content. So for instance, if you want to start a men's health channel, if all you do is talk about men's health, you can become the top voice in that space. I'll pick on Rudy with Alpha Investments. Because of his content is basically centered around Magic the Gathering, or it was. He was rewarded highly early on by the YouTube algorithm. Me, the YouTube algorithm, like when I look at similar channels, or I think it's called trends now, I get finance channels. I get like certain collecting channels. I get weird channels on even men's advice. So it's like the YouTube algorithm doesn't
Doesn't know what to
know
do with you. Okay.
exactly. So I think that hurt kind of the growth of my channel.
Yep. That explains a lot for me as well. I get it now. Yeah. I thought about making the separate channels, but I just don't. It seems like a lot more work. Now I got to maintain 2, 3 channels. I don't want to do that. Yeah, I'm sticking with one. I'll just be punished. We'll see how it goes.
That's yeah.
What kind of thought do you put into your content before you hit record? Obviously, we've talked about the editing piece, but what about just the preparation of what you're going to say, the message delivery? How much time and effort do you give that before you hit record?
No, that's a great question. There are certain videos out there where I kind of do regret. I won't say
Okay.
the content of the video, but something that I said, like the way I answered a Q&A question,
Mm,
or maybe I
mm,
presented something about my personal life in a more egotistical or arrogant way that I now
right.
go back and I go, wow, that was 3 years ago. I would never say that again or become,
Today, right? Yeah.
you know what I mean? That's
Yep.
the problem with being a YouTuber. It's all out there in recorded form where even people like I'm kind of lucky in a way. Like I don't talk about this YouTube channel with friends or coworkers or anything, or even my family.
Right.
It's like if you're lucky enough to find it, you want to sit through 500 videos to see that one thing that you don't know about Shawn, you do you.
Right.
But for the most part, like I don't really talk about it. So in
Mhm.
that sense, I do wish that I planned more for like my Q&As.
Okay.
But it's very interesting because I'll have an idea of what I want to say, but then when I turn the camera on, sometimes I'm not able to verbalize it as perfectly. Like certain
Right.
videos, I will like write an outline or a script a little bit,
Right.
not scripted
Mhm.
per se, but I'll have ideas at least that I want to present.
Exactly. Yep.
Other videos, like I said before, I'll come down here, I'll turn the camera on, and I'll just have like this thought where I have to get this out. I have
Right.
to just talk about this and see what it does. And I'll
It's
come
a
down
natural
here
flow.
yeah, and the video is
Yeah.
not gonna do anything, and it'll be like the video on Funko Pops. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. There's a video I did on Funko Pops where I even used, like, the thumbnail that shows, like, Luke and Leia in Funko Pop form stuck
Mm.
in, like, the trash compactor scene from Star Wars.
No, I didn't see
It
that.
was it was when it was announced that Funko Pops were being sent to the landfill.
Mm.
So I wanted to warn people about Funko Pops being very speculative with no true organic collectability. And I think I recorded the video in like 15 minutes in one take. And I said, this video isn't going to do anything. And sure enough, that was the first video on this channel that went viral.
How many views did it get?
It's 40,000 and counting, I think, at present time.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it was like, it's still my highest performing video. And I didn't expect that. And I wasn't expecting it. I went to bed after uploading it. I woke up and oh my God, I got hit with an avalanche of just emails, hate mail. And then there were people too in there trying to praise me as well for like, wow, you were brave putting that out. So that
Whoops.
was something that I didn't know because
Mm.
it was the first time it happened. The only time that ever came close during the pandemic, I put out a video with Marvel trading cards.
Yep.
Marvel trading
Yep.
cards started trending, and I said,
Yep.
do not invest, and that video went viral.
Hmm.
But that at least I uploaded at like 2:00 in the afternoon.
Okay.
So at least I was prepared for the
Right.
comments that were. It wasn't like I went
You're
to
not
bed.
waking
Woke
up to
up,
it.
what the hell happened?
Yeah, and sometimes when we're on that natural flow and we're just getting our ideas out, you just you say things and things just come out and well, I probably could have done that a little bit better. But it's always retrospect, right? I mean, you can always say that when you look back.
I was the whiteboard videos are pretty much planned
Yeah, yeah.
because when I do a whiteboard video, I also do that not only for my audience, but it keeps me on topic. So I'm less
Ah,
likely to go off on a tangent when I'm going down a list.
okay.
When it works.
Yep. I'm with you. I'm with you. It's kind of what I've loosely done here in a sense.
Yes.
One of the other things that we spoke about earlier, I want to touch on this before we try to bring this to a close, and that is the influence you think that you have on the market, especially as you've grown. The things that we say and do and put out there. What kind of influence do you think you have in the viewership or people who just see it for the first time and then go about their business into their own collectibles industry?
That's a great question, because this is something that I feel strongly about. When I first started YouTube, I didn't think that I would have an influence on these markets, because obviously I'm never going to be as big as like Rudy or some of these other guys that pretty much command a major presence in these spaces. And that's why I will admit, I'm sometimes, I think, a little bit too harsh on Rudy. I think some of the commentary I make, but also too, I think some of it is justified. And let me give you an example. And I learned this the hard way. I did several videos on coins and also large size currency, where I show my part of my collection, not all of it, but I show some of it. And I talk about how you can build a profitable collection, the ins and outs, the idiosyncrasies of the market. And both of those videos have performed well. The problem that I have with it is people tend to develop a confirmation bias for something that they like, that they see other people liking or investing in. So this is one thing that I learned about YouTube. They see me as a wealthy, educated guy talking about currency or coins. They then come to me and they go, well, gee, that guy is at that level. He has that collection. Therefore, if I go after those items, I'm going to have that level of status, or that, you know what I mean? Whatever it is that you think it,
like they want,
Yes. And that's something that I learned early on. And that's why I tend not to do a lot of those videos anymore, because I would have people coming to me going, well, Shawn, you got that banknote that's worth like $7 grand. I'm going to go and bid on that in the next auction sale. And I'm like, well, do you know anything about this market? How much money do you have? Are you prepared to pay $7,000 for a banknote that's just going to sit in a safety deposit box and not pay you any interest or dividends? And when I would talk to those people, it didn't seem to faze them, because they now associated that item with having some level of status.
It's their idea of success or achievement. It's like, hey, no, this is how I get it. It's not 401k and S&P 500.
And this is the criticism that I have, not much with Rudy, but he has to understand what he puts out. A lot of people look at what he has sitting around, like his house with his paintings, and they go, oh, he put all his money in Pokemon and Magic the Gathering cards. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to get to that level. And that's why on my channel, I'm a little bit hypocritical of that, because I think, and I know that he does state this in videos and that, but I think that there has to be more commentary where that's not how I became successful. I did other things in addition to that, and I got lucky.
And you can't give that nuance every time you want to show a piece of your collection, and people, to your point, either don't listen, or, I mean, it's not realistic to reiterate the journey every time you want to show something in the present.
Correct. Like, I can give you two examples. I'll give you a great example. One of the things that I talk about in my channel is utilizing the optimal collecting grade. And I've done several videos where I apply it to comic books. And there's certain comic books that I mentioned, like Batman 227, Batman 251, Detective Comics 400. And what's interesting is all these books that I mentioned all started trending upward on the secondary market. And now I'm seeing, oh shit, I've created, sorry, I probably shouldn't have said that, but I became my own worst enemy. It's just like I talk about, I like to collect and go after vintage Star Wars proof toys, proof cards. That market started escalating up now. And I'm sitting there like, is it because of me? Do I really have this influence now?
It's an interesting thought. And what a dichotomy in that you want to share, give references, speaking points, and even lessons learned, which is why you created this channel your channel in the first place. But then you can't do so once you reach a certain point, because then it gives a negative output. It's like, well, then how do I navigate speaking to this and not be so generic that nobody gets it? It's interesting. I don't know, which is probably why Rudy just does whatever he does. He's like, oh, whatever.
I mean, to be fair, I will say this. I've noticed that ever since I came on the scene, I don't know if I had an influence on this or not, but he does bring up at certain intervals that people would be better off going after an S&P 500 index fund. Rather than some of this cardboard or investing, speculating in this. And I would like to believe that I had an influence on that, because he didn't do that in the beginning. he did that when I started bringing it up on my channel. I don't know how true that is, but other people have observed that.
When he watches other channels, more than he says he does. So I've
Yeah.
seen him in a couple of comment sections. I'm like, okay, so he's paying attention. He's letting something play in the background while he's packing orders or something. All right. So maybe before we change, though, what do you think the responsibility is of the bigger channel, like a Rudy or a PokeRev or somebody else in the spaces? I mean, because
I'm going to speak freely here. I'm going to be very honest. I think that they should do more collaborations. Like there's a lot of people that even say to me, Shawn, how come you're not, you know what I mean? You're not communicating more with like Rudy with Alpha Investments or SM Pratt or any of these other guys. And I'm like, look, I don't do live streams on my channel. I don't invite people to come on my channel, but if they want to invite me on their channel, I'll gladly consider it. I have no problem. So I do wish that these bigger channels would realize that they have, in my opinion, again, this isn't across the board, but this is just how I think, an ethical duty to at least collaborate with other people and entertain other talking points, because that's how you get to the nuances of this. Where if you would put like me, you, who is Brian with PokeNE.com. I like that guy. I watch his channel a lot, believe it or not. He formed a business. If you would put all of us in a room, do you have any idea how much knowledge we have, even if we don't agree on anything? The amount of knowledge there would be so just valuable. I mean, just like a 2-hour live stream, just of that. I mean, it would be monumental for the community.
You get to challenge each other and, have a couple of good discussion points. And, well, I thought you stood here and you believe this. Well, no, not really. It's only in this nuanced conversation. And then it's this. And but it's kind of even to the same point you were making before about maybe showing a piece of your collection and causing market fluctuation. Having that weird moment where they say something and they're worried. And I'm guessing that's why Rudy doesn't go on anybody's channels. He's worried about what he said and it impacts his business. And I can imagine that's why they don't often do those kind of things. But yeah, it would be nice. I would love to see it. Get a couple of you guys in the room and see what comes out of that. That would be a beautiful conversation.
Correct. Indeed. And I understand he's busy. I mean, I get it. He runs a massive enterprise, to be honest.
I can't imagine how big it is behind the scenes. I mean, given the amount of product he has and the number of orders he pushes through his Patreon, I can only imagine. That's crazy. And selling out like that much in like seconds and minutes, like hundreds and thousands of orders.
His fiance must be going nuts.
I would imagine so.
The Pokemon bathroom. Remember the Pokemon bathroom? I'm like, how many women? There's no woman that I've dated that would ever tolerate that.
But it was a spare house.
Still.
Yeah. So they weren't living in that one.
True.
It's funny though. On the same note of orders, I did a little bit of an experiment the other day. So we also sell singles, and I said, "Oh man, my sales were down on TCG Player." I'm like, "Oh, that's strange. I wonder why." So I started thinking about it and looking at my inventory and trying to assess like what did I miss. I said, well, I changed my shipping label company, and so I did raise my shipping up about 25 cents. I said, but is that it? Is that the reason? I said, well, let's swing this pendulum to the other side and just see what happens. So I just, for giggles, as a thought experiment, I said, let's put the shipping to 0. So I turned shipping to 0. It took me a week to catch up on the orders. It took me a week. I had part-time help. I had to get the kids and the wife to help. It was crazy. I couldn't believe the difference that shipping made. And they bought far more. It was still worth it. I didn't lose any money except maybe on 1 or 2 orders. That's awesome. But they bought so much more just because it said free shipping. I'm like, all right. Yep. I won't do that again. I'll just dial it down a little bit. I won't go quite that low. It was brutal. It was brutal. All right, Shawn, we've been going. I do want to be respectful. I know you said you give me some time, but I don't want to take all of it. I want to give you some time for your late night rants as well for yourself.
It's okay. If you have more questions to ask, we can go ahead. Like
okay.
I said,
and if anybody has any questions too, let us know. I'll put this here just so let them know. All right. So guys, if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat, and we'll start to get to them here as we start to wrap this up as well. So I didn't hear too much about anything with your childhood when I watched your videos and listened. I heard some things, we talked about dating and some of the breakups, but what was your childhood like? Did you have siblings? And
I have an
you
older
grew up
sister.
in older sister?
Yeah, she's 8 years older than me.
Okay. And you guys all just lived in Boyerstown, right? Pennsylvania your whole life? And
yeah, my parents are still married. They've been married.
Okay.
They're in their 70s. So they've been married 50 some years.
Wow.
I did go through some childhood trauma. I will say that. That did shape me as well. So
Okay.
I did not have a perfect childhood. I will say that.
They stayed together.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And sister was there. That always helps a little bit to have a sibling. I was the only child.
She was 8 years older, and she got married when she was 20.
Oh, okay. So she was out soon.
Sweetheart. Yep. They're still married to this day. They have 2 beautiful children. That's my niece and nephew.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
And they're still in Boyerstown?
No, they're in Blandon, Pennsylvania. They moved across the street. My parents built a house right across the street from them. So they're all together. I'm in Boyertown. And actually, I want to move the other way. I want to move towards Collegeville and Philly eventually. So,
okay.
All right. I'm going the other way. They can stay there.
What's taking you that direction?
I just like the area better than Boyertown. Okay. I came here because I wanted to establish a business. I moved here because I grew up here. And now that I've done all that, Boyertown really doesn't offer me opportunities for a social life or anything that really would be considered something that I'm, you know what I mean? There's really nothing here.
Are you looking to start a family of young collectors yourself?
I would like to eventually, yeah. But I say eventually. I'm already 48. So.
Luckily, we have a little bit more time on our side as men. So
correct. My problem is the women that I date are all career oriented, and a lot of them don't want to have kids.
Yeah,
that's the problem that I find.
It's interesting. My wife and I spoke about that a lot, in the past 5 or 10 years, and it's so interesting. She's a very career oriented woman as well. She always has been, and we were workaholics until we had our first child, and that changed everything, obviously, in a good way.
Yeah.
But as we had that child get older and then had our second child, it's funny how she looks at those things differently. And obviously, she still wants to be the best in her career and be the top in her space, and she is in many ways. But she also now sees the differences in what it means and having the fulfillment of being a mother and a wife. And she's like, I never thought about this to be more important than what I was doing in my career, because she defined herself as her career. And it's hard to change that. So a woman that we're dating at this age where we are today, I can understand that would be a challenge to say, okay, well, whether she's 40 or whatever the case may be, she's already well established into her career at that stage. Yeah. I get it. Got one from the Green Shiz. Good to see you, Josh.
Sure.
What are your guys' thoughts on MetaZoo's revival? Interests? Are you buying? What do you think, Shawn?
No, I would stay away from MetaZoo. Well, first of all, even before MetaZoo went to zero, I always warned, very hard to launch a new collectible card game. I mean, even if you look back throughout the years, there have been some that have come and gone. Like Megacorp was one that I thought was very interesting. That's gone. I don't even know if Exodus is still around.
I'm not sure.
That premiered. Rudy did a video on that. Even like Flesh and Blood, I'm really not a fan of, just because of the speculative nature, the way that it was promoted with the alpha beta sets. And then they had the cold foil cards that people were getting graded, paying $3,000 for, selling them on the secondary market. It left a bad taste in my mouth. It was like they took the Magic the Gathering formula, tried to copy it, and I was literally waiting for them to do a reserve list next. Like, come on, guys, you did everything else.
Well, and I think you're definitely not wrong with, especially how MetaZoo came out the gate. It was definitely a investor, financial oriented mindset, I think, and playability and players and the game was more secondary or tertiary at best. Do you think that will change under new management? Are you familiar with the new management team at all?
I am.
Okay.
I consider it such a speculative risk at this point, even attached to the name. You know what I mean? It's just,
Yeah.
I wouldn't touch it. I mean, if you like the game, if you want to play it as a game, buy it as a game. Don't try to invest in it at this point. I mean, to be fair, there's a 1 in a millionth chance, I'm just pulling that number out of the air, that it could become the next big thing. And now you're going to profit handsomely if you go after the early stuff. But I don't see that happening. I mean, look what happened the first time around. Is lightning really going to now strike?
Yeah, I got some odds against them, but I will say that from my point of view, Josh, I think Charlie has a good chance. I'm glad to see that Charlie has it, and so that gives me some hope, and I'm excited to see. Yeah, I'm excited to see what happens there. I'm not looking at it more from an investment standpoint. I would like to see what happens. For example, we had I didn't call it out earlier. We had Basic Trainer in the chat. Sorry, Basic. I was caught up in conversation. I say Thrifty in here as well. Pokey Chef, good to see you guys. Thanks for stopping by. Basic was in here, and Basic was actually traveling with another friend of ours, and they were playing competitively, and that's what they did, and they really enjoyed it. And so he was all in. And he said the gameplay was great. He loved it. It was very, I'd say, advanced compared to things like Pokemon or Magic. But obviously then things started to fall apart. They weren't the priority. The prizes didn't really pan out, and then things started to crumble. So if they can get the playability right, and I think, I forget who it was I was speaking to. I think it was actually in a podcast, and they spoke about what makes a TCG successful. It's the players. You got to have the players as the base. What are your thoughts on a successful TCG? What would be the stepping stones of have this, then this, then this?
You need to have the players first.
Yeah.
You also have to utilize tricks like mass-produced scarcity to bring in the speculators and the investors, so you have a stable secondary market. Secondary market's everything for a collectible card game, unfortunately, in today's day and age. That's why Pokemon and Magic are #1 and #2 right now.
Appreciate the question. We had one last part of it here. Shawn, you buying any graded video games?
Yeah, I have nothing against the graded video game market. Now that the bubble has popped, I think that there is opportunity in the market. The problem is the market is still too volatile. Like when I do a video game video where I talk about this, you can see like a copy of Pokemon Red graded in 9.6 or 9.8 WATA with an A+ factory seal. One time that game will sell for 40,000, and then it'll sell for like 60 to 70,000 another time. So what is the actual price? It's hard to appraise. That's my problem with the market. It's too speculative and it's too volatile. That said, there are opportunities. I'll give you an example. I'm a huge fan of TurboGrafx 16. Many people have probably never heard of that. It's an older video game system that competed temporarily with the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. Well, the Sega Genesis killed it, and the Super Nintendo pretty much finished it off like a fatality from Mortal Kombat. But for the time it was available on the market, it was known as the PC Engine in Japan. So it was based on that particular system, and it sold very well in Japan. It's just the US market where it struggled. Well, there are some games for that I would like to own factory sealed and graded. Well, one in particular came up for bid on Heritage called Ninja Spirit, and it ended up going for $1,000. And I think my max bid was like $600 or $700. And now I could kick myself because I look back and I go, you know what? For an extra $300,
right?
I should have just paid it and added the 9.8 Ninja Spirit, which I'm probably never going to find again, to my collection. So that's an example. If something does come up that I deem being sold at a good price that's reasonable and not extremely speculative and volatile, I will bid on it and buy it.
Yeah, I know Josh was into the graded games there for a little while too. I just don't know where it was in the pre, post, during bubble. We'll have to follow back up and see. All right, Shawn, what do you do outside of the things we discussed in your free time? You go out there and play disc golf, or what's your side hobbies, man?
Okay, I love cultural events. I love fine dining. I love, of course, going to museums. I will tell you this right up front. I'm not a sports fan.
Yeah.
I was thrilled that the Eagles were in the Super Bowl because I live right near Philly. right?
Okay.
I
Yeah.
did watch the Super Bowl for that reason. If it was any other team, I wouldn't even watch the Super Bowl.
Okay.
So I do follow, of course, sports cards, sports memorabilia, but I'm not a fan
Right.
of watching sports. I like staying active. I love hiking. I
Okay.
love finding in nature. I love going for long hikes. One great thing about being in the Philadelphia area, there's a lot of historical parks and things to do around
Oh,
here.
I didn't realize.
Yeah, I love that. I go to Valley Forge a lot, walk around there. Very
Okay.
historic. I also like, of course, working out. I'm a movie buff. I like
Okay.
watching a lot of
Okay.
movies. So
Okay.
that's really hardcore. I like reading too.
Yeah, I
So
could
yeah,
tell. I think one time you said you had a storage unit of like thousands of collectible books that you've read over the years.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Literally, this is just a sampling. I actually have more books on collectible finance that I got to bring out.
Okay. All right. Love to see them. Love to see them in the next videos.
Yeah.
All right, Shawn. As we now look to maybe bring some of this to a close, I want again first say thank you for your time.
Of course.
I appreciate you taking some of the weekend almost time here to spend with us and have a beautiful 3-hour conversation to kind of free up some of the thoughts, conceptions, but also educate us on many of the things that myself included that I didn't know. Definitely clarified some details, but also helps us see things in a new light. And I think that's important when we look at getting outside of our bubbles and making sure that we can hear the real messages that you try to deliver. So I appreciate that, Shawn.
You're welcome.
There's 2 questions we typically go with here near the very end.
Okay.
Ryan says, "Wow, you guys are still going." Yeah, we're still going, buddy. Almost though. We're wrapping it up right here. And this one will be around something specific to you, and the last one, again, as I mentioned before, is generic for everybody. Knowledge and application of that knowledge is truly power. Given the breadth of knowledge and experience that you have in the collectible space, what words of wisdom would you like to leave with our audience?
Regarding collectibles?
Yeah.
Avoid the hype. Take a step back and analyze why you're truly buying this stuff and how much you want to put in these markets. Because at the end of the day, always remember when it comes to collectibles, these are illiquid assets. You have to find a buyer, and there are transaction fees involved when you go to sell. So don't let collectibles define you. Define the collectibles that you collect, meaning make sure that you have a passion towards them and you really want to own them. There's too many people that are engaging in like hoarding and crazy antics in these markets right now because they're caught in the FOMO, fear of missing out, and the hype. Be very careful if you're investing in these markets and you're falling for the hype. Because a lot of YouTube channels, a lot of information on social media is now tied to a economic algorithm that makes money for the creator. Just understand not all of them have your best interests in mind. That's what I would leave you with.
I felt like you had something there outside of collectibles as well. Do you want to drop a little knowledge there outside of collectibles?
I think that it's important that you have a perspective of what you want for your life and who you want to be. And I think it's also important to do some self-introspection and try to at least become self-aware. I always recommend, and this is something that's controversial, but I do recommend therapy, like mental health therapy for pretty much everyone, because I think that there's something that we can learn about ourselves, or maybe there's a trauma there that we're not aware of that needs to be worked on. And once we get through that, we can actually start to accomplish our goals. And it's never too late, even if you're approaching 50 like we are. Or
Yep, right there with you. Okay, that's good advice. Remove those blockages and make sure that you can move forward in the right, clean, clear path that you're referring to. Yeah, I like that.
And always remember, in a world where you can be anything, be kind.
Yeah, I like that. Well, we got one last one, Shawn. One day we're all going to leave the hobby. What legacy do you hope to leave in the hobby when you're gone?
I hope that more people would understand the financial implications of how these markets work, and would also understand how much, how do I want to say this? How much pull auction companies, grading companies, and high profile investors have in these markets. You always have to remember these markets are completely unregulated. As a result of that unregulation, markets can easily be manipulated.
Right.
And one of the things that really concerns me, and I've said this before on my channel and in other interviews, the greatest fear that I have in the antiques and collectibles trade is unchecked power. Auction companies, grading companies have way too much power. And once they have that power, there's no way to take it back. And as a result, the individual collector is pretty much left to the whim of these high profile investors, grading companies, and auction houses. So just keep that in mind. That's really what I want my legacy to be, that there's more than meets the eye than what most people realize goes on in these markets. And I can tell you this firsthand, and I'm not going to give any specifics. There are people right now in back rooms talking about how they can increase profits by manipulating these markets to no end.
Good advice, Shawn. Good advice. Dig deeper. Don't accept things at face value, and understand the decisions you're making. Yep, I love it.
Look closer. Yeah.
Yep. Shawn, as I said, truly appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. I really enjoyed the conversation today, and I hope that you did as well.
Thank you. It was very helpful. Thank you.
Everybody in the chat, everybody's going to watch later on. We again thank you for your time. Much appreciated as always. Stay tuned. And anybody has not checked out his channel so far, all the links are down in the description below. Go give some love, give a subscribe. And until next time, we'll see you on the next Pokemon Rants, guys. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Thank you.